тихеньку у зеленому саду. Чи не вийде дівчинонька рано вранці по ладу? Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнява, як дівчина саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнява, як дівчина саду ягоди рвала. Вийшла дівчинонька рано вранці воду брать, а за нею козаченько веде коня напувать. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнява, як дівчина саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнява, як дівчина саду ягоди рвала.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Futures
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1065 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today we have very, very big news, actually. Ukraine launched another massive attack across Russia using attack drones. Also, Moscow's been targeted with some of those drones. And also, NATO's considering urgently raising spending to 5% GDP, effective immediately. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world. And we have had a significant amount of news today coming out from multiple different areas as a statement was made once again by the Office of the President of the United States today, directly stating that the NATO alliance as an entire organization needs to immediately ramp up defense spending per GDP numbers up to around 5%, meaning that it appears that the United States is seeing that there may be a possible conventional war on the horizon, as this is far exceeding the 2.5% GDP spending quota that has currently been in place by the NATO Secretary General for decades at this point. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear in the Russian Federation that right before the statement was made by the Office of the President of the United States today, President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation apparently placed an important phone call and interrupted an entire meeting to place the call. It is believed that at this point, the phone call was directed to the United States, most likely to the Office of the President, and was what preceded the emergency statement that was made by the President of the United States today in light of the situation that's currently evolving within Eastern Europe. We've also been able to hear that at the exact same time, only hours later, mass amounts of Ukrainian drones were targeting major Russian infrastructure throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation, from Bryansk to Rsezow, and not only that, around Moscow itself, as we were able to hear that air defense batteries were firing around the city of Moscow, and Putin was being rushed back to the Kremlin immediately in light of these Ukrainian attacks. Not only that, but the attacks in Bryansk are actually believed to have been Storm Shadow missile attacks, being fired from the Ukrainian Su-24s using either British or French provided missiles that were able to hit the major depots and refineries within the city of Bryansk. Meanwhile, outside this news in the Russian Federation, we have also been able to hear of an interesting development of a mysterious note that happened that pertained to Israel today, as a US C-17 took off from Germany, landed at the Nevatim Air Base in Israel, and then rapidly departed only a few hours later to return back to the airfield at Rsezow, Poland, to offload an unknown cargo. At this time, we do not know what was offloaded, but it appears that some sort of a weapons shipment or a US forces relocation has been conducted from the state of Israel and into Eastern Europe at this time. We have also been able to hear major combat news coming out of Ukraine, as the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to secure several prisoners from Russian units that appear to be near to the Ukrainian border area, possibly suggesting that a Russian offensive into the Sumy Oblast may be happening sometime within the near future. We've also been able to see that Ukrainian forces have held their positions inside the Kursk Oblast around the city of Sudzha, and we have also been able to see around other frontline areas that Ukrainian forces have continued to inflict high casualties and ensure that the Russian Federation is not making any advances at this time. But we have a large amount of news to cover, and of course, I gotta say that today is a news day like no other. We have not seen diplomatic escalations in the Ukrainian conflict in between the Russian Federation and the Western world to this extent, but it does appear that it is becoming somewhat concerning, and not only that, most likely something that will be pertaining to the safety and security of all citizens of Western countries and NATO countries here within the near future. But moving us
It's really honestly wild how quick it is actually escalating between the US and Russia, because like we've said before, our prediction actually came true, and it looks like the US is actually getting really opposed to Putin in the recent days, and it's only been about 3 or 4 days so far, and it's already going south. So honestly, this is actually beating out our prediction. Like, this is going south faster than we even expected.
It seems as though things are certainly starting to break down in between the Russian Federation and the United States incredibly quickly. And starting off with our first piece of news today to show y'all really the sequence of events of everything that happened, we were able to hear that some sort of an important phone call was placed by the president of the Russian Federation to some sort of an interesting international group. It was not specified actually who Putin talked to, but I'll read y'all all the information that Nexta was able to get on this quote-unquote important phone call that was placed today. And this was, once again, I want to remind everyone, early in the day today in our news gathering cycle. So this is one of the first things that happened today in terms of news. All today, the Kremlin media has been talking about Putin's important phone call that's supposed to take place today. It had already taken place by the time we're on air. In the morning, Peskov issued a press release mentioning it, and during the meeting, Putin personally said he would leave the meeting early because of an important international call, not specifying who the actual group that he was calling was. It is not yet known who the mysterious caller on the other end of the wire was that caused the Russian Tsar to leave the meeting in such a hurry, but another thing is known. 5 anonymous interlocutors told Reuters that Putin realizes how seriously the war is affecting the Russian economy. In particular, high interest rates are affecting industries unrelated to the war. The Russian dictator believes that the main goals of the war against Ukraine, including the weakening of the armed forces of Ukraine and a land corridor to Crimea, have generally already been achieved. This is reported by Reuters, citing the words of an anonymous source familiar with the Kremlin's position. As for weakening the armed forces of Ukraine, the question is controversial. Prigozhin will not lie, and he is now dead, of course, about a year and a half or so. The AFU has become much stronger than it was before the war began, but as for the goals of the war, anything is possible, given that the Kremlin has not decided on these goals for the 3rd year, and the ones that they have decided on are as vague and abstract as possible and change depending on the mood. Zelensky has also stated his assessments as well, but that's largely a side note at this point, because the more interesting note is that very early in the morning today, Putin made an important phone call to some international group. It is believed that this phone call was placed to a country, and here on this channel, putting together all of the pieces, it appears that this phone call was actually placed to the United States of America. Because not long after that statement was made, the President of the United States came out in a public statement to the nation of the United States, and also apparently largely to the allies of the United States inside of NATO, immediately warning and demanding that all NATO countries must immediately increase their military spending in GDP percentages to 5% or higher as soon as possible. We were able to hear this today from the office of the president. We do actually have the video right down there. We will not be playing it, but we will summarize what the statements said. The U.S. president told NATO countries to increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP immediately. This is more than 2 2 times what NATO currently requires for members' spending. And it does appear that this is coming after the phone call, the international phone call was made today by Putin, which may be suggesting that whatever was spoken about on that phone call to the United States may be leading the President of the United States and the remainder of his cabinet to assume that the worst may be coming down the line, and the large military buildups that have been seen in the Russian Leningrad military district, including Kaliningrad and the entirety of the Russian-NATO border that Russia and NATO countries share, may possibly become a future war zone. What is very interesting...
You gotta admit, Enforcer, that's kind of unusual because, to make it clear, like there have been phone calls between Russia and the United States during the course of the last 4 years or so, but those phone calls are generally with lower-level intel guys speaking to Russian intel guys from the United States, and it's usually, actually it hasn't been between the two presidents. For Putin to call up the United States, that is extremely unusual because it hasn't happened in quite some time, and if he did in fact call the United States, I'll be very curious to know if he lobbed a threat at the United States based on what we're hearing, or if he simply called up to maybe seek peace. I really doubt it's the second option. I have a feeling he had some words for the U.S. president of some sort. So very, very intriguing.
It's very intriguing, and there's a lot of options and possibilities like you're talking about there, but based off the picture that we're getting right now, it doesn't appear that whatever was spoken about was a positive sort of a development. With the President of the United States now coming out, and also I have to recap this, of course we're not getting into politics here, but I will explain this. Many people know that the current President of the United States has also served a prior term as President from the years 2016 to 2020, and as President of the United States during that time, he also was once again largely on the warpath to see that NATO countries increase their military spending percentage-wise per GDP to be able to meet the NATO spending quota, or largely target. That target was 2.5% at the time, and many countries, including the Federal Republic of Germany, the United Kingdom, and the Republic of France, were actually spending somewhere around 2% of their GDP, or around 1.8% of the GDP. Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, those numbers have modestly risen, and some countries like the United Kingdom and the Republic of France have actually been able to meet the 2.5% spending quota. But the Federal Republic of Germany is still coming short at around 2.2 to 2.3% of their GDP in military spending. This, however, is a massive departure from the previous statements that were made by the president in 2016 to 2020 and the statements that are being made right now. The statements that are currently being made are actually ramping up military spending higher than the United States even spends, at least at the moment. To put this out there for all of y'all, at least on the metrics and percentages that we know right now, the United States of America actually only spends 3.7% of its GDP on defense spending, meaning that even by the news statement of the President of the United States would be falling short by around 1.3%. And this is apparently preceding what I would assume is going to be a bill moved forward in the Congress to approve a much larger amount of military funding here within the near future, most likely increasing the military spending budget by hundreds of billions of dollars over this next year. Such rapid growths of military spending, especially 5% of GDP spending, is largely suggesting near mobilization of all countries that are inside of NATO and starting to convert a lot of their industry into wartime manufacturing, or a lot of their governmental spending objectives into rapid mobilization and growth of armed forces. This generally would lead us to believe that at the moment, the President of the United States is putting out a general call for NATO nations to mobilize and rapidly expand their armed forces for a possible conflict that may ensue against the Russian Federation. 2.5% is the spending quota to largely keep a substantial armed force and also sustain it. 5% is to grow unbelievably large armed forces relative to the size of even European countries, and also sustain that size as well. Of course, there's really only one thing that could come out of that, and that has to be that the important phone call that Putin made, which must have been to the United States, did not go well. And whatever was said in that phone call has now led the President of the United States and the cabinet in the executive branch to believe that there is most likely a warlike scenario that could likely happen here within the next 6 months to a year. That's probably why the 5% emergency demand is being made at this moment, is so that way NATO can be ready in 6 months to a year when this conventional war might kick off, and they're already appropriating enough funds for those militaries to work off of and for NATO industries to rapidly start mobilizing for the conventional war that may only happen for a couple of months before it was to end in a negotiated settlement. But still, there is a lot to be said about what the statements from the office of the president were today. And once again, I do want to remind everyone, we're not getting into politics here. We do actually have the statement, if y'all want to see word for word what the president of the United States said today, right there in that video that I'm showing y'all on screen. If y'all want to watch that, we're not going to be showing it on the channel because people get wildly political whenever they even just see a picture of the former president or the current one. Please go to our Twitter, the link is in the description below, and y'all can actually find the video clip and watch it for yourselves. We're not going to be showing it here because we largely summarized exactly what the president was saying. But nevertheless, a lot of people are starting to talk on this channel about the news and the dots that are being connected at this moment and what they're largely beginning to mean. And what is the reason behind largely begging NATO to immediately ramp up defense spending to nearly 5%, which is an entire 100% increase from even the 2.5% GDP spending quota that NATO has outlined right now. And it seems as though a lot of people are believing that apparently information has been ascertained by the office of the president that war is imminent with the Russian Federation, and this is largely pre-mobilization leading into that conflict. But that, once again, I have to remind everyone, probably will not last that long, most likely only about 4 to 6 months. Some others are saying that the U.S. simply wants NATO to pay a quote-unquote fair share, which is something that has been said in the past by this very same president when he was president in 2016 to 2020. Others are saying that they need more info on this, and others are unsure and undecided at the moment. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Because I'll be quite honest, this sounds a little bit more than the quote-unquote fair share approach that was tried in the past.
All right, so it looks like 58% of the audience said the U.S. believes that NATO war is imminent, and that's why they want the defense spending raised to 5% GDP, while 26% said the U.S. simply wants a NATO fair share plan, and 12% said we need more info on this one. And honestly, I would say the timing is very, very important to examine with this because this was announced on the same day that that alleged phone call might have taken place between Putin and the United States. So I think the timing is very important to take a look at there, and that probably has a very direct correlation between those two announcements. I would personally say that on the current track that we're on, I think that Russia is preparing for a war with NATO. And we're not really sure what that would look like. It could mean that NATO attacks maybe Finland or Estonia. We don't really know just yet. They could attack somebody just to make a point. They could actually try to invade those countries and take the land permanently. We don't know what they're really doing. But even though Russia's in a weakened position right now, they still have a very large army. They're not very well trained, obviously. They can't fight that good. But they still have a pretty big army, and they could cause some havoc if they decided to do so. So I think the phone call today made the current president believe that now's the time to jump on this quick before it gets really out of control. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I'm believing that I would have to be with 57% as well. This is looking incredibly concerning, at least at the moment. And before I move into this, once again, I'm going to make this very short tonight. No domestic politics in the chat. The president's the president. It is what it is. If we see domestic political comments saying that you like a president or you hate a president or you hate a certain party or you like a certain party, you can expect a timeout initially and a ban the second time. That's largely how it's working tonight. But beyond that, I do believe that many people are beginning to understand, and I believe the office of the President of the United States is getting very clear information that some sort of a conventional war is most likely imminent with the Russian Federation or is becoming a high certainty at this point, and they are now trying to move forward with trying to largely prepare NATO for this action. I do want to remind everyone that many people do have a decent point in saying maybe this is an extension of the fair share approach, which was an approach made by this very president back in his previous term in 2016 to 2020, where he attempted to say that NATO countries were simply not spending enough on their defense. They were not spending above the 2.5% GDP spending quota. And for this reason, he was pushing and largely pressuring a lot of NATO countries to rapidly increase their spending budgets to be able to reach that 2.5%, which was never accomplished in his original term. However, he has returned, and the situation has changed quite heavily. There are very few countries in this point that have not met the 2.5% spending quota that we are currently seeing is still the norm, according to the NATO General Secretary, or the Secretary General. The fact that the president is now coming forward, and we have not heard anything about this until 3 days later after he became president, and now that there was some sort of an international phone call, a mysterious form, conducted by Putin today, and just after that, the president of the United States came forward to the public and then stated that all NATO countries not only have to meet the 2.5% spending quota, which was the original fair share approach, they're now having to bump it 100% higher to 5%. That is showing us largely that we can understand there has to have been something that has gone on in the background that is giving us an understanding that things are not going well in between the Russian Federation and the United States. And there would be a lot of reasons to assume that that is the case. The President of the United States did just directly threaten the Russian Federation, quite literally yesterday, and stated that if they do not come to the peace negotiating table, things will only become worse for the Russian Federation, and the United States largely would be responsible for bringing the Russian economy and the military to its knees through the Ukraine war, and that could be largely some sort of a threat that was serious enough that Putin is now calling up the office of the President of the United States and directly threatening the United States in turn, which may be leading the President to assume, and the Cabinet to assume, that a war against the Russian Federation, at least within the foreseeable future, may be likely, and now they're trying to rapidly mobilize and prepare all of these NATO countries for a upcoming conflict. Also, another thing I want to point out, once again, the United States doesn't even meet the 5% GDP spending quota that the President of the United States is now putting forward. And that is giving us an understanding that the United States is also most likely going to be rapidly expanding its defense spending budget as well, along with the rest of NATO, to be able to meet this 5% quota that's now being laid out by the President of the United States. It may actually be laid out by the NATO Secretary General here within the future, although we do not know about that development yet. And if that is the case, and we also see that the United States starts rapidly ballooning its defense spending, which is already the largest in the world at nearly $1 trillion annually, the only assumption that we could get from this is that this is mobilization for some sort of a larger conflict with the Russian Federation. Of course, many people are saying, and I also want to address this while we're on it, that this isn't actually directed at the Russian Federation, this is directed at the People's Republic of China. And that simply is markedly untrue because of the confines of the NATO Charter. There is no way for NATO to be able to exert military power or abilities outside largely of the confines of the North Atlantic and Europe. Any sort of a conflict pertaining to the People's Republic of China over the island of Taiwan would be entirely out of NATO's jurisdiction as per the words inside of the Charter, meaning that this is not a preparation or a build-up to deal with the Chinese. This could only be a preparation or a build-up to deal with the Russian Federation. And this has to be showing us that things are not going well in the background so far in between the current president and the Russian Federation's war plan, which appears to be going well on into the future, even at this point, whether the United States is threatening them or not. So at this moment,
also not to be pessimistic either, but right now the conversations between the U.S. and Russia are generally staying in the back channels right now. They're taking place on private phone calls, and so far I haven't heard a statement coming out of Putin directly saying anything directly threatening the new administration in the United States. But the moment that occurs, I think we're going to be in for a very, very wild ride the moment that Putin decides to engage publicly with the United States, because of course the U.S. just made a public threat against Russia. And if Russia makes that publicly in return, I think hell might actually break loose if that actually happens. It's going to be a bit of an ego war happening between the two leaders there, and it could get ugly quick. So I'm not sure exactly what anybody would actually do in theory or in practice, actually, but that would be bad for like overall peace relations there. So if there is any peace to be had, it won't be happening after that.
It looks like it may not be happening after that. And also, one more thing I got to address. Someone just said, actually, I see that America pays 16% in NATO. That's not the metric. That's not it. Like, just want to address that really quick. NATO, there's no such thing as paying into NATO. Like, yes, there's a little, like, NATO fund that goes on. It's incredibly small, and it generally just pays for AWACS aircraft and maybe a few joint bases. It's nothing incredibly large. NATO as an alliance works off of a GDP spending quota. When you're in NATO, you're not paying into the NATO army. Otherwise, America wouldn't have the U.S. Armed Forces. We would have the NATO Armed Forces, and we wouldn't have our own military. That's just not how NATO works. NATO is a alliance of multiple countries that have come together to share a common defense objective. That means that these countries all banded together and say, we're palsies. If anyone punches our teeth out, we're all going to punch that guy's teeth out in return. But that also doesn't mean that everyone cuts off their arms and they all have one giant fist that they knock that guy's teeth out with. Everyone's still got their own fists. Germany has their little fists, and they put money into getting some pre-workout and some weights so that way they can make sure that they're nice and strong. Same with America, same with Britain, and same with France. All of these countries do that on their own. Yes, they're all a part of NATO, but that doesn't mean that they don't have their own fists. That means that they all have their own fists, but there is a certain spending quota that's supposed to go into their their work out to make sure that each country is big enough and strong enough that if we got in a war with Russia, everyone would be able to knock their teeth out. So that's largely how it works, to explain that in the simplest terms, because I don't know how, but we've been talking about this for 3 years, and there's always a small fraction of people who still do not get how NATO spending and NATO funding works, because there is no such thing as NATO funding. There's such thing as military defense spending domestically within each country that makes up NATO. So with that,
Also speaking of NATO spending here, I heard a stat today that was kind of interesting. I wanted to check and see if you think this is true as well. There are some saying that even with the depleted forces that Russia currently has from losing so many guys inside of Ukraine, if you combined all the European countries and their armies, the Russian army still outnumbers them, even with all their losses. Is that true?
say that one more time.
That even with all the Russian losses that's been taking place in Ukraine, all the guys they've lost, the Russian army, with how it's growing and how they're conscripting people, is still larger than all the armies in Europe combined.
I don't think that's the case. I think at this point, the European armies are still a little larger, because if I remember correctly, all of the European land forces in NATO right now number around 1.7 million strong, if I'm correct. And then you add on the United States, which is about an additional 1.2 to 1.3 million active members, not including the reservists. We still have a massive force disparity against the Russian Federation that is within our advantage. I think right now, the Russian army may be somewhere around 1.5 to 1.6 million strong, only including the actively serving, not the reservists, because well, we kind of do have to throw in the reservists, because the reservists are around, I believe, 500,000 strong, something along that line, and they're all have been ordered just recently to train to regular army standards in the Russian Federation to practically be mobilizing as well. So with that in mind, they may actually have somewhere a little over 2 million, including the reservists, but then also if you include U.S. reservists like the National Guard, well, not really the National Guard, but if you include the Army Reserve, the U.S. military or the U.S. Army's manpower numbers skyrockets through the roof, and we still have a manpower advantage over the Russian Federation in terms of just raw numbers in Europe at any given moment. So I don't think that's true.
Because I was looking here, it looks like United 24 Media put out a chart here showing the comparison of the actual military sizes of the EU versus what Russia has currently, and also versus what Ukraine has. I'm going to shoot this chart over to you real quick on Discord so you can actually show the audience this, and we can take a look and see if this is actually true or not, because that's a pretty bold claim that I heard today, and I was curious to know if it was true.
And let's take a look at this. So, deny. No, thank you. The largest armies in Europe are 6 to 7 times smaller than Russia's. So let's see what they're saying.
If you scroll down, there's the chart right here.
All right, here we go. So yeah, it is hovering around 1.5 million. So I was largely correct with that. But this is a little bit misleading, to be entirely honest. Because, yes, it's like, sure, if Russia went up against each of these countries, yes, they have a lot more manpower. But the Ukrainian, this isn't factoring in a whole bunch of things. This is honestly misleading. Ukraine didn't have a 880,000 strong military at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine. The army of Ukraine at that point was only about 250,000 strong or less. They've rapidly mobilized over the past 3 years to build up this kind of number of actively serving. So it's a little bit misleading to make it look like, look, they're just not ready, because they could all mobilize as well. But also the other thing is that all of these countries, the Netherlands, Romania, Greece, Spain, the UK, Italy, Germany, France, and Poland, are all in NATO. So instead of measuring them up as individual groups trying to go up against Russia, like this is like a Batman movie where all the henchmen try and fight Batman one at a time, it's like you actually add them all together and then you get the number out of that. And also including a lot of the minor members of NATO, such as the Czech Republic or Slovakia or any of those smaller countries, and adding them all up, the number of armed service members across the entirety of the European side of the NATO alliance is pretty comparable to what the Russian Federation was fielding pre-war. And then if you add on the United States, because this is also another bit of a misleading thing, the U.S. is in NATO, and it's here to stay. That's just not changing. A lot of people think that that's going to change. That's especially not going to be changing now, with the United States being hard in support of Ukraine. I think that ought to be keying a lot of people in. Apparently, the United States still has vested interests in Eastern Europe, or really Europe as a whole. Otherwise, why would the current U.S. administration, which many people thought was going to abandon Ukraine, would already be leaning so heavily into supporting Ukraine that it now looks like we're in a race to mobilize to go to war with Russia? What kind of sense would that make? We clearly still have a vested interest in the region. And so then there ought to be an extra little line over here, Matthew, on the graph to the far left outside of Poland that includes the U.S. armed forces, which would be about comparable in size to what the Russians have been able to mobilize over 3 whole years. So
Yeah, and also, by the way, I was doing some number checking here because now that you explain it that way, that makes a hell of a lot more sense. This chart honestly is misleading because it, like you said, it's assuming that each one of these countries is going to go up against Russia by themselves, which would not be the way it would work because they're in NATO. So I was taking a look because it says that Ukraine has 880,000 military personnel in service right now. It looks like before the invasion took place in Ukraine at the start of 2022, Ukraine only had 196,000 active duty personnel in their military. So it looks like they were able to raise a lot of forces really quick, which I would assume that all these other European countries could do as well if they needed to, if a war actually broke out. So even though their standing military right now is the size that we're looking at on the chart, they could easily bump those numbers up, double or triple them, just like Ukraine had to do when the war started. So we're good, actually. That makes a lot more sense.
And let me really quickly pull up. Okay, so here we go. Here's the actual number. I quickly Googled just to make sure that we got the number right. How big is NATO combined? So how big is all of the armed forces of NATO combined? NATO currently has around 3.5 million active soldiers across the entirety of the alliance. So we actually beat out the Russians in manpower figures well over a 2-to-1 ratio, which is incredibly good because that means that any relative point of a front line with the Russian Federation, if we're able to bring all of our combat power to bear, which would be likely about a month or two into that conflict, we would outnumber the Russians enough in most places. A offensive just simply wouldn't be possible by the Russians by the numbers, and then later on, moving outside of that, the offensive objectives would easily be possible if we shifted the numbers around to have localized superior numbers advantages in certain fronts. Not even speaking about the massive technological disparities that exist in between the Russian armed forces and NATO armed forces as a whole, which would already put us on the upper hand advantage even if we were outnumbered in most instances. But beyond that, this is an incredibly misleading kind of a graph. I don't really like it when they do this kind of stuff because also the other thing, I'm going to just be completely frank here, Poland's 216,000 troops and the total of their armed forces is more advanced and more well-trained than the 880,000 troops that are in the Ukrainian army. Don't mean to bash the Ukrainians, but that's just the straight-up truth. They've been trained to Western standards. They are entirely Westernized. They are rapidly mobilizing and building up armed forces, have been for the past 3 years. They have some of the most advanced main battle tanks, some of the most advanced aircraft, some of the most advanced electronic warfare systems, some of the most advanced surface-to-air missile batteries that can be seen. Poland would be able to knock a bloody nose into the Russian Federation quite easily with just 216,000 troops at the initial start of a conflict. Not to say,
yeah, man. Poland is our guy. Like, if anything broke out, Poland would be the one that I would be most confident to be able to take on the situation really effectively. That's literally right there in the midst of everything, right next to Russia and Ukraine. So I would say Poland's got it down. Like, and also we've armed them to the teeth, and they spend more than pretty much any other NATO member of all of them. Actually, they spend the most.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, NATO is in a good position currently, but once again, increasing the defense spending to 5%, which once again, I have to remind everyone, is far beyond what anyone was really looking for ever, is showing us that there's some sort of a pre-mobilization going on at this point. So with this in mind, there has to have been something very bad that was disclosed in the phone call today in between the United States and the Russian Federation, or the talk over the phone call completely fell apart and then went into hostile territory practically immediately. So with that, we are going to be moving on out of that news in the United States today, because speaking of the United Kingdom, which does have an impressive military, they have been able to introduce, just for a little bit of comic relief, since we kind of had a really crazy start to this whole show tonight, talking about what appears to be the beginnings of mobilization here in the West, but in the United Kingdom, we were able to see that the British, of course, are leading technology in all kinds of regards. They did create the Dragon's Fire directed energy weapon, the first laser-based weapon in the world that was successful, which is a major technological advancement and an achievement of the British people. But another thing that they've been able to beat out everyone on and get to the punch first was creating a convertible aircraft. Many of y'all will know about the Eurofighter Typhoon, which is an amazing aircraft that is used by multiple countries, including the United Kingdom. Kingdom. This is actually a British Typhoon seen in this picture right here. But one thing that is always a drag, one thing that's always been an issue, is creating this incredibly well-designed and curved cockpit window that is on the front and the back of the cockpit window frame. These are incredibly expensive, as a matter of fact, and it's always difficult to manufacture these. And so the British today came up with the idea, what if it was just easier if we got rid of the back half part and just left the front windshield on and made it into a convertible? So that way not only could the pilot get fresh air, but he could also see his enemy combatants a little bit easier, considering that the top would be down. And it looks like they finally did it. They did it through an amazing technology called a directed bird impact, kind of like the directed energy weapon. It takes a bird, slams it onto the cockpit visor, and then the whole thing goes flying off. And this allows for them to be able to create a convertible Eurofighter Typhoon. And look at this absolute genius of invention. Amazing.
Oh my God. Oh, man, that is not supposed to be like that.
So, jokes aside, what happened today is that this Eurofighter Typhoon was conducting some flight exercises. It ended up impacting a bird, and the bird actually hit the visor, well, not really the visor, but the canopy of the cockpit in somewhat of a weird angle, and it actually was hard enough that it dislodged the entire canopy, and it just sheared off the Eurofighter. Somehow, the pilot was, well, not really somehow, it was quite easy for him to do, it was just incredibly loud, but he was actually able to fly it back to the airbase that the Eurofighter originated from and landed. So you're seeing the aftermath of after the canopy flew off and after he was able to get it back to the airfield. But still, a really funny clip nevertheless, because you never really see someone just casually moving around a Eurofighter that just doesn't have a cockpit canopy. That's incredibly rare.
Gotta suck. Like, you know, if your like windshield breaks out of any other plane, it's obviously gonna suck. But it seems like in a fighter jet, that's like really, really bad if that breaks.
Oh yeah, it's bad. But you know one thing that's really lucky? It doesn't really seem, at least from what we heard or saw right now in the clip, that the canopy after it sheared off ran into the vertical stabilizer or ended up scraping any of the wings significantly. It looks like it sheared off cleanly and didn't hit anything, you know, of course, flying away from the aircraft. So it looks like the Eurofighter, beyond missing the canopy, is perfectly fine. So they'll be able to get this thing back into service fairly soon. But what a weird clip. You just don't see stuff like this often. But moving on from that, once again, big shout out to the Royal Air Force. They probably have some of the coolest aircraft, in my opinion, in service in terms of looks. The Eurofighter Typhoon is just, quite honestly, one of the classiest aircraft out there in the Western world right now, next to the Rafale, or the F-22, or the F-35, or the F-15, or the F-16, or the A-10 Warhawk, or the millions of others that we also currently have in service right now. It's just a very nice plane all around. But anyways, moving on from that, and on into some more major news that we've been able to hear today. Another interesting thing that was seen, before we get into the real big headline news here in a second, of Putin rushing back to the Kremlin and the massive attacks that were happening in Russia just an hour or two ago, we were able to see of some mysterious flight that was conducted by a U.S. Air Force C-17 today to Israel. According to the information we have, the C-17 took off from Ramstein Air Base in western Germany, I believe near somewhere around, let me see here. It is in the Ruhr Valley. It's somewhere around, I'd be dipped. It's like, I think, around Koblenz or something around Bonn, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But nevertheless, the C-17 took off, flew to Israel, to the Nevatim Air Base, loaded on some sort of cargo, and then flew to Rsezow Air Base, and is apparently unloading the cargo and now flying back to Ramstein sometime later on in the day. We do not know what the cargo was, but it appears to have been sent on a special delivery to pick up something from Israel and then send it to Poland to be forwarded into Ukraine. We do not know what this is at the moment. It's a bit of a mystery, but still a very interesting thing to see that happened.
Do you think it was the weapons they seized from Hezbollah, like, you know, all those AKs and things that they already know that Ukraine can use? It could have been just that, maybe. But, I mean, that's a pretty big cargo aircraft to send just for that.
It could have been, but another possible idea that I was having is that it may not even be Israeli equipment that they were picking up. It may have been a U.S. military redeployment. It may be that they moved a THAAD that was in Israel, considering that the situation down there is dying down very quickly. They may have loaded up some parts of a THAAD battery and then send it up to Poland to be deployed in Eastern Europe, given the unfolding situation that we heard about with the statements from the President of the United States today, and also the mysterious phone call that was made by Putin. That may be a U.S. force redeployment that was also done today.
Interesting. And also, I see that Ocean Technical put in a reply to this post. It said that Israel apparently decommissioned their older Patriot Pack 2 systems. Is that what you were talking about just a minute ago?
Actually, I was talking about the brand new THAAD. Remember, we have 2 THAADs right now in
Oh,
Israel.
yeah, that's right. I forgot they deployed 2 of them there. But yeah, also I remember them talking about those Patriots that they have there that they just decommissioned. We never got a follow-up on that. So maybe it was like the THAAD like you're talking about, or maybe we did send a Patriot, another one.
Maybe we did. If we sent a Patriot, it would be an Israeli one. I do not believe that the U.S. has any Patriot batteries that are currently inside of Israel at the time. I think the only air defense batteries we have in Israel are THAADs currently, and those are only a very small number. There's only 2 of them. So if there is a battery that was moved, it may have been that a part of it, not all of it, was moved on the C-17 into Poland. And over the next few days, we may see that C-17s continue to transport this THAAD, if it is the THAAD, into Poland so that way it can be deployed in Eastern Europe. THAADs do have a large coverage area, even larger than the Patriot and far more effective. But another thing that is a little interesting to me is that we do have an Aegis Ashore system inside of Poland. Not to say that that would literally hold down the entirety of the airspace in this region, but it is interesting nevertheless to think that we do have one of the few Aegis Ashore systems seen here in this area, and we're going to maybe be redeploying a THAAD, or we're sending some new air defense to Ukraine that's being forwarded from Israel. We don't really know at this point, but still it is an interesting fact that this aircraft had some sort of mysterious aircraft on board and took some sort of a special expedition to Israel to be able to pick up whatever it was trying to grab. But beyond that, we are going to be moving on from that small piece of news. Just a little bit of a mystery for all of y'all to talk about and try and think and consider what it may have been. But it's time for us to move on into the Russian Federation. This is really where the other major part of the news happened today. The Ukrainians, like many people have heard over the past few days, and this probably won't be shocking, has conducted another long-range strike into the Russian Federation. What is shocking about this one, however, is the extent of damage that was caused, and also it was so threatening that they actually had to race Putin back to the Kremlin at full speed through central Moscow, so that way his motorcade, or wherever he was, may not end up getting hit by a drone, and Putin might end up getting killed. So it appears that they had to race him back to the Kremlin. This is all after everything that happened that we've already told you on the news about already in between the United States and Russia today. But moving on into this area, we were able to hear that air defense forces in Moscow were firing on drones that were seen over the city. And wildly enough, a decent amount of them were seen around Shelkovo, which is to the northeastern side of the city of Moscow, meaning that these drones had actually somehow flown over Moscow or around Moscow near to one of the ring roads, and then was coming in from the northeastern side of the city. This is Shelkovo right here, and there's also a larger airfield that is present at Shelkovo as well, which we do believe is currently housing a Russian strategic airlift wing or some other form of Russian aviation asset that is within this area. Nevertheless, there was active air activity within this area. We were able to hear that from Russian military bloggers, and there was a claim that nearly 6 Ukrainian drones had been shot down, with some of them being over the Shelkovo area. We were also able to see later on that Putin was being rushed back to the Kremlin pretty much during the exact same time. It was about 5 minutes after those reports were coming in. We were able to see the motorcade racing on its way back into central Moscow and towards the Kremlin, maybe towards a hardened bunker or shelter that is somewhere within the complex.
Also, by the way, this happens actually not actually all the time, but it happens a little bit more often than usual. But I think he might have been racing back to a bunker or something, considering it happened right as the attack was starting. And the drones were flying near Moscow, so they probably just rushed him to safety. But also at the same time, though, it could have been around the time of a phone call. It's a lot of speculation on this one.
This one, well, at least based off when the footage was published, this was about 8 hours after the phone call was supposedly made, because this was literally just hours before we went live, maybe 3 or 4 hours because it's nighttime, and the phone call was made during daylight hours in the Russian Federation, which was largely the morning hours in America during that time, which would perfectly coincide with being right before the statements of the president today came out. So this appears to have been afterwards and during the attack that happened just a few hours ago. But we were also able to hear that the Russians are pissed. Before we show you all the actual damage that occurred, which didn't really happen in Moscow, it happened in the areas around Rsezow and Bryansk, we did hear, however, that the Russian military bloggers and the Russians crave another Oreshnik strike, because it looks as sources, though, the Russian Telegram military bloggers, kind of like ourselves, but on the Russian side, said massive blow on Ryazan. The largest oil depot and thermal power plant are burning. The city was not ready for this after such a what?
Oh my God, man. I was just laughing. They said the city was not ready for this. It's like, well, when was the city ever ready for like literally a war to take place on the thermal power plant, the oil depot? It's like there was never really a situation that you'd be ready for that unless you had like, the best air defense in the world around those stuff. So, they weren't going to be ready under any circumstance.
But nevertheless, Matthew, the Russians, they crave the Oreshnik. They said the Oreshnik simply needs it. I don't know what it's needing. I guess like iron. I guess it's iron deficient or something. But still, they said it needed something. And we also were able to see really the reason why they were pissed off this badly. It wasn't really what happened in Moscow. It's really what happened outside of Moscow in some of the larger cities in Russia's southwest. And we were able to see around the area of Bryansk today, things just were, it looked like hell down here. Here's one of the clips, letting y'all hear the drones as they were coming on in.
And a dog.
Man, that dog said, like, dude, that dog was like, what the hell? But still, we can hear the drones. Dang!
I think the dog scared me more than the missile.
You know what? That was scary. And you know something? You know Putin had to have been scared when the drones were flying around Moscow. And that really does beg the question, before we get y'all into the real juice in videos that we have from Ryazan and Bryansk. Was Putin rushing to safety today in that little motorcade? And it seems like a lot of people are believing that he was. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So why was Putin rushing back to the Kremlin? Why was he rushing back to the Kremlin shortly after Ukraine attacked tonight? So it looks like 68% said Putin was rushing to safety, while 14% said Putin was getting on the phone, and 10% said it sounds like a usual occurrence. And I would say this one's pretty straightforward to me. I think he was being rushed to a bunker because, of course, he is a moving target while his convoy is outside of the Kremlin and outside of the bunker. And, of course, he's the bunker boy. He needs to get back to the bunker. But I'm with the 68%. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I'm with the 68% as well. I think Putin was, I think his security detail was probably scared for him. He was probably scared, but trying to act like he wasn't. And so when he was walking out of the dacha that he was in, he had to take a quick stop to look at a painting on the wall or something, just to act like he wasn't phased, and then get in the car, and then they raced him back to the Kremlin. Probably what happened. But we were able to see down in Bryansk that damage that resulted, because the Kremlin L plant was hit within the area. They're cooking.
The El Kremlin? It just sounds like a Spanish plant.
Man, they hit that El Patron. like, you know what I mean? Like,
the El Kremlin, oh yes.
Man, let's see. What alcohol brands begin with L?
El Patron, yes, some El Patron. Poured up.
1 second, let me... Dang, man, I don't actually think there's an El Patron liquor at all.
There wasn't. I'm not an alcoholic, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not an alcoholic either. So, alcoholics of the chat, let us know. Is there such a thing as an El Patron alcohol? We would like to know. Or a liquor, as that would technically be called. But moving on from that and into our next clip in Bryansk, we also got to hear that apparently these drones may have been accompanied by storm shadows, because these explosions were significant in size and may have been suggesting that Western weapons were once again used on Russian territory today. Let's take a look. Oh. Хорош, блядь. Нет, хорошо, блядь. That means it's not good. But moving on from Bryansk, now it's time for us to really get y'all into the juice. Now, y'all been sitting here, and I gotta thank y'all for being patient with us. There's been a lot of news to cover tonight, but I know that some of y'all came here for the fire and the fury, as some people have said in the past, of what really goes down inside of Russia. Y'all aren't looking for Putin in a motorcade running into Moscow. Y'all aren't looking for just a little explosion in Bryansk. Y'all aren't looking for possibly the creation of World War III and the mobilization of Western forces to deal with the Russian threat. Y'all aren't looking for that. Y'all are just looking for big explosions. And so now it's time for us to bring y'all to where those really happen, which was in the city of Ryazan. Ryazan kind of sounds like ricin, which is another thing that Russia has made in recent days. But one thing that is fairly interesting is that in the city of Ryazan, there lies a significant refinery. This one, the RNPK. This is the RMPK oil refinery right here, one of the larger ones within this region of the Russian Federation. And while it is large, it cannot be, of course, denied that the true largeness of this refinery is the explosion that it produced today after it got hit by Ukrainian drones and the thing turned nuclear. I'm not even kidding. People were running from the refinery because of how big the explosion was. Let me see if we can just get it. Yeah, here we go. Here it is right here. There it goes.
Holy crap.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, that guy's taking off. Damn. You know that's gotta be hot. I've never seen Russians move this fast over a fire in my life.
Dude, they are flying, like, they are literally flying down the street to get away from this thing. But the explosions were huge, significant, I would say, because we were able to see that one drone was shot down around Rsezow tonight. Here's that clip. Here it comes. Okay, maybe not. Maybe that was
Nothing was shot down, man. It was a Russian lie.
Something happened. I think a Russian lie was just shot down. But moving on from that clip and into the next one, we did get to see the attacks on the thermal power plant in Rsezow, because I forgot to mention, they didn't just hit the refinery, they also hit the thermal power plant, which is within the area as well. And let me see really quickly if I can find that thermal power plant, because I did not find that before the stream. I found the refinery, did not find the power plant. So, let's see. Where would it be, Matthew? Where would this be? Usually towards the river. So let's move towards the river, the Oka River, which is significant for other historical reasons in the war. But where in the world would this be? Where could it be, Matthew? Where would it be? The Rsezow thermal power plant. You know what? Let's just type it in. Rsezow.
Yeah, I think if I had to cheat on this one.
Thermal power plant near Rsezow. Oh shit! It's right at the refinery. Like
it's right next to it.
It's literally like right next door. So I guess now we know. Here it is. This is the thermal power plant. Believe it or not, folks, it's literally like right next to the refinery. So I'm just blind. Like I literally left the refinery, went all the way over here to Technonicol, which sounds like some form of an alcohol. I was looking over here. I literally passed right over it. So nice, great. We found it. It's right here. Anyways, we were able to see that not only did they hit the refinery, they also hit the thermal power plant, which quite literally is pretty much on the same compound as the refinery. So here's the clip. Опа нахуй.
Прям маленькие хлопки, хлопки, хлопки и большой прям удар, бабам.
Хлопки, хлопки, хлопки.
Хлопки не успел я заснять.
Oh, a little nice flash over there.
Ah. You said this is a thermal power plant, right?
Yes, this is a thermal power plant.
Well, that means they'll be generating plenty of electricity now as it just got super hot.
Man, they're sitting there and they're like, man, business is literally booming. It's like, just like, this is great. But beyond that,
Could it be burning at 4,000 degrees centigrade, bliat? Will that increase the profits, bliat?
maybe Kilovano. It's like, but we're gonna try it. But you know something that's a little wild to me, Matthew? Looking at the city of Rsezow, it's a little bit wild how they constructed the city, because they're like, okay, where are we going to put all of the strategic infrastructure of the city? If a war happened, where would we not want everything so that we could be hit by one bomb and then we went, oh shit, everything just got taken offline? And they're like, I know. What if we put the thermal power plant and the giant refinery right next door to each other, where it was literally just across the street? So that way, if anyone wanted to attack the Russian Federation or Российской Федерации, they could slam a raketa right into the middle of our oil refinery / thermal power plant and not only knock out the city's major industry, but also its power production at the same time. Screw us over in two ways with one rocket. And then someone went, genius, blade. You're like the freaking Burnham of Russia, blade. Let's do it. And then they came up with this. I don't know who in the world came up with this city planning, but this was horrendous. Also, one really quick, since we're really dissing on Rsezow a good deal, we got to figure out what the Congress Hotel Forum looks like, because it's top rated. Oh,
man.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Living like the old time imperial Russians.
What the hell?
This is interesting.
It's $45 a night to stay here, mind you. We also have the Supreme Soviet, so that they can try you for your crimes the next morning. They have the judge's chair set up and everything. But oh look, a pool hall.
Oh, look at that. It's like the place where they used to kill people when the mafia was around and stuff like that.
Yeah, also, Matthew, wasn't this the place in the Twilight Zone where that one guy was, like, playing pool, and he was like, I'm the best that there ever was, and Fat showed up and tried to, like, tell, like, you know, that whole deal. You remember that?
Yeah, I think it looks like it.
And then we also have the lobby. Good God, that's a lobby. That's a North Korean lobby right there, man. I never seen anything like that. But, the real hotel rooms.
Oh, there we go. That's
Oh my Lord.
the sweet special.
Goodness, dude, that's actually where you get executed. This is like an NKVD like torture room or something like that. But look at the view. Look at the view. It's an industrial hell. That's
Hey, you
great.
get a nice view of like a industrial gulag.
Man, nothing beats waking up in the morning and looking out on an industrial hellhole named Rsezow. And also, look at this guy right here, wearing the tiger shirt, looking at the camera like he just wants to end it. Great stuff. Like, really great. One more picture for the road. What is this?
This is what happens when you don't have much decorations, but you got to pull something off.
Dude, I swear, Matthew, that the governor of Alabama actually walked into a place like this, and I believe it was called Tutwiler Prison, and they said, we need to put more money into the prisons. It's looking terrible. And the Russians have it as a hotel. Like, it really is crazy what Russia is like. But anyways, nevertheless, looks as though things just were going poorly in Rsezow. But y'all want to see more clips, right? Y'all don't want to hear me yapping and yapping. Y'all just want to see the debris being spread about by this explosion. So let's check it out. See this truck passing by. Oh, but you see the explosion over there. Holy moly, the thing's going nuclear.
It really is, man. The Russia was having a hard time this evening, all the way around. A lot of stuff exploding and spontaneously combusting.
Man, I gotta say, a really nice sight. Really nice ones. And also, y'all want to see the refinery burning a little bit more. Oh, this clip starts off at 100. Wow, let's watch this again. And that's the sound of the seagulls when you pull out the potato chips near the beach.
It really does sound like a seagull. It really does.
Yes. The fineries of life. A nice, good wind to power the sails and the sound of the seagull as you go through the sea. It's a great life to be a piratey. That sound like that.
That's kind of wild. Like, usually the Russians don't run from fires. They usually stand around and watch, but these are fierce.
These are a new level.
And what was that? Like a gas, like, reservoir exploding or something? Because that was a humongous explosion.
I don't know, maybe it was a condenser? I'm not really entirely sure on that one, but it blew up significantly. But nevertheless, Matthew, I have a feeling that a lot of these Russians are getting stressed out, and they would just like to simply hear the sounds of the sea.
Jeez, man. Oh, man. The screaming never helps, by the way. Everybody was already running before the screaming started, so that didn't help.
It only added to the ambience, though. Truly classic. Also, someone just put in a dodo emoji. That's dirty. Like, that is dirty right there. But still, anyways, it's time for us to move on from Rsezow. That was all the wonderful and impressive explosions that we had tonight for y'all that kind of looked nuclear. But hey, look at this. They also set off the air raid sirens in Saratov just because. Like, they kind of got scared because they heard that everyone else was getting curb stomped in Russia. So they just started setting off the air raid sirens without an active threat in Saratov. So check this out.
Just a little Russian panic, that's all.
Man.
Seems see if they were southern, they'd be used to this because tornadoes come through.
Man, if they were southern, you'd hear someone in the background right now in this video saying, "Hey, Darlene, I think a damn tornado's coming through." You know, then they'd all be getting outside to look at it. But anyways, moving on from that. Still, looks like the Russians were freaking out. That's the best thing we can take away from the air raid sirens in Saratov. But moving on from that, it is time for us to move on and into the remainder of the news that we have tonight, which is actually on the Ukrainian front lines and pertains to everything with Ukraine. But before we get into that, there is a big question that many of y'all have been asked, as Russian Telegram channels have called for renewed rationing strikes on Ukraine, which are intermediate-range ballistic missiles of a supposed hypersonic variety, following Ukraine's major attacks on Russia. And a lot of people have been asked to put in their thoughts. And so it does appear that the Russians are believed they will most likely carry this out. Others are believing that the Russians will withhold due to the U.S. threat. Others are believing that the Russians will think about it at least, and others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what kind of thoughts did people put in tonight on the poll, and what are you thinking about the thoughts as well?
All right, so 54% of the audience said Russia will likely carry out the IRBM strikes as a result of these major attacks, while 21% said Russia will withhold doing that due to the U.S. threat, and 18% said Russia will think about it at least. And this will be an interesting test of the current threat by the United States toward Russia, because the threat is that we can either do this the easy way or the hard way.
The choice
And
is
I would say-
yours.
Yes, that choice is yours. I would say that launching an IRBM at Ukraine once again would probably be choosing to take it down the hard way. And I think Putin kind of knows that. So this will be a test of where Putin's mindset actually sits. If he launches another IRBM, as his people are requesting, that could pretty much sabotage anything possible between the U.S. and Russia maybe having peace relations of any sort and any inkling. So I'm going to say Russia will think about it at least, but I think they might be tempted by the taste of nuts and honey, but ultimately it might go sour. But Enforcer, what say you?
I believe that the Russians may carry out another one here soon. They're getting in a point where they're kind of backed up against a wall because the U.S. isn't really friendly to them. And isn't that kind of weird? You know, I just want to point that out. Isn't that kind of weird? Everyone kind of thought that the war was going to end and it was just going to be appeasement. Now we're kind of going down the path that's leading us to what appears to kind of be war. It's a little interesting how that works, but beyond that, it's almost like we said that was what was going to happen a year ago. Just to once again point that out. Just subscribe, by the way, if you want to actually hear what's really going on. Subscribe to this channel. I think we're getting things dead on the nail these days. But beyond that, I do believe that the Russians will most likely carry out this arresting strike to once again go, non-bullies were big, I'm not bluffing, you know, or as Putin said, "Nia it the bluff," or whatever he said in that clip, Matthew, in that video you put out today, but which, by the way, was masterfully produced. I mean, it was truly.
Oh, thank you very much.
The best. Everyone tell Enforcer Matt that he made a great video today if you watched it, because it was incredibly good, and I saw that a lot of people were having nothing but raving reviews. And me personally, I watched it before it went out. I had to be like kind of like the party officer who like signed off on it. So I watched it. It was incredibly good. I thought he did a great job at it. But beyond that, I do believe that the Russians will most likely be carrying out this kind of an attack here in the near future. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And it's now time for us to move on into the next part of this stream. And before we move on into that, we do have to take a little pause. A lot of people have said many things. This chat's been going mental tonight. As a matter of fact, we've been getting more than about 130 chats every minute, which means that there's about more than 2 coming in per second throughout most minutes of the stream. But before we move on into this whole next segment where we talk about the actual frontline news that happened in Ukraine, we do have to make sure to address a couple of questions, because a lot of people have thrown in some questions, and some of them are incredibly interesting. Others are also very fun to talk about. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night. This one's going to go to Char G, who's of course a longtime channel legend and puts in a very generous $100 donation. And thank you very much, Char G, for that support yet again. He said, "Sorry, I've been MIA lately due to the SoCal fires, but In-N-Out is still open and waiting." And what do you know? That's very good. Thank you very much, Char G, for supporting the In-N-Out Fund once again. I heard that In-N-Out was giving out like free food to the firefighters out there, by the way, which is a pretty good thing to do for a business. And I'm glad to see they were doing that. And unfortunately, there is another big fire happening in Southern California right now that started sort of back toward, I believe, Santa Clarita. That looks to be a pretty big one. But thank you very much, Char G, for that support, and I hope you're safe. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say a huge thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. That is massive support. And I got to thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. And I hate to hear that y'all are continuing to deal with fires. After one gets put out, another takes its place. The place is being ravaged by fires at this point. Let's see what, oh my goodness, man. The Palisades fire has continued to slowly move on through Brentwood. We haven't looked at this much, at least I haven't over the past day or two, but it is still wild to see that the fires are still a big issue in this area, and they're still trying to find a way to contain these fires, or largely just even try and deal with them at this point. And now there's new ones popping up, like the Laguna fire near Oxnard, and now the Hughes fire, which is the newest one near to Santa Clarita. It's just absolutely terrible. But beyond that, I do have to say a huge thanks to you once again, Shargi, for the support. We are, of course, always thinking about the citizens of the United States, wherever they may be, including the ones out there in Southern California right now, who are having to deal with some of the most arduous fires that has ever been seen in national history. In fact, the most devastating ones in terms of monetary damage so far. Luckily, not the deadliest one yet. I don't even think it's going to be getting close to that, but it will be the most damaging fire that has ever been seen in terms of monetary figures, which is is crazy to think of, but nevertheless, the heroic firefighters and citizenry of LA are continuing to work hard to try and deal with them. And it's great to hear that In-N-Out's doing its part too, and hopefully we'll be out there sometime in the future. I don't know when we'll be able to return back towards the California way, but hopefully we will be able to soon, because I'd personally like to see it all again. It was very neat, and also I'd like to see all the folks out there that watch this channel day in and day out like you, Shargy. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one, but a massive thanks for you being a legend once again, and supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, to everybody in the chat that gave me really high praise in that video today, huge thank you all for the kind words. I sadly was not able to respond to everybody. There was like 100 different chats that just came in, but thank you all very much for enjoying the video today. And I can assure you there will be more of those to come from the Enforcer Explained series. It's coming up soon, so there will be more. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, we have a $100 donation from Michael Tripto, who's also a longtime channel legend. And thank you very much, Michael, for also the extremely generous support. He said, I don't care where this money goes, as long as it helps out Ukraine in one way or another, and bless the world from the USA and Mikey.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, Michael Tripto, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I also have to say, first off, I thank you massively for the huge support. Secondly, there is a way that we largely segregate support that is sent in through this channel to make sure that either goes to us or Ukraine. We don't really like to mix the baskets together, I guess is the best way to put it. So if you send in a super chat, all of that money is going to support Enforcer Matt and me, and making sure that we're paying the bills and keeping this channel running. If you want to support Ukraine, however, but you only want to do it through this channel, make sure to show up on a Sunday, because that's when we run Sunday night fundraisers, and that makes it possible for the entirety of the Lee Spring Army to be able to decide where their money is going. So instead of everyone in the LSA or everyone who watches this channel just throwing in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to Enforcer Matt and me, and just hoping that it gets to where it's supposed to be, we allow y'all to make the choice yourselves. So you can either support the channel directly through Super Chat, or you can support Ukraine through the fundraiser. So I hope that does address that fairly well. I do thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible and keep it running day in and day out. And so with that, it is time for us to move on to the final super chat of this segment, and then right back into the news. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our last one here is another very generous $100 donation, and this one goes to David Dornblaser, also yet another longtime channel legend. And thank you very much, David, for the massive support. He said, sorry that I'm late, and at least I can catch up, and world events are moving very quickly these days.
And I would have to say that they certainly are. I mean, they're moving at an unbelievable pace these days. It honestly is hard to keep up, and especially since the new president of the United States has been inaugurated just a few days ago, I'll be honest, things are moving at a head-spinning pace, to be entirely honest. We went from the war just largely, grinding on as it has, to now we're moving into what appears to be pre-mobilization for a war with Russia. It's a really wild thing to think that it's kind of getting to this point, at least that quickly in just a few days, but I still thank you massively once again for the huge support and helping this channel to keep on running, and it's perfectly fine to be late. We always say it's better late than never, and I gotta thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because folks like you help us to be able to keep the lights on and pay the bills here in the background, so that way we can continue to get the news out to each and every single one of y'all of what's happening each and every day. There are loads of people who have watched this channel so far tonight. 63,000 people have watched the channel just in the first hour and 20 minutes that we've been on air. And out of those 63,000 people, I believe that only about 20 or so at this point have thrown in a super chat, I believe. Those people, all of those people, including you, David, don't have to throw in a single cent. No one has to support this channel a dime. But the folks who go out of their way to do, even though they don't have to, make this entire thing possible and help us to be able to make a living doing this, so that way we can continue to dedicate ourselves 24/7 to the best news coverage that we can possibly get. And I got to thank you massively once again for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, well, you simply would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling even right now. Also, before we move on, I see a lot of people talking about Enforcer Matt's short video that was made today called Enforcer Explained. And, well, actually, it had a title to it, but generally, the series is called Enforcer Explained. And we were wanting to share with you all something that was very interesting, very cool about that, because that is not going to be a standalone like other videos in the past. That is actually the beginning of a brand new Enforcer video series that will be going out as regularly as we can. It's not going to be daily, and it's not going to be replacing our short war summaries, but it's an entirely new thing altogether. The general plan is that we are going to pick trending topics that are out there in the world right now. Of course, the Russian economy and massive sanctions is something that is trending at the moment. And so Enforcer Matt went out of his way to speedily make a video about it. It wasn't incredibly long, mind you, even compared to our short war summaries. It was about half the length. But y'all watched over 50% of that on average, which tells us that a lot of y'all were really enjoying the way that content was delivered and the kind of information that was in it. I can already tell y'all that I am working on one in the background right now. But of course, in typical The Enforcer fashion, it's going to be a little bit longer, most likely around 15 to 20 minutes long, but it is going to be talking about another big topic that a lot of people have been discussing here recently, which is the United States attempting to retake the Panama Canal. Considering that a lot of people are talking about that, we thought that we would talk about the possible diplomatic actions and tensions that are now beginning to surround the nation of Panama and the United States about the future that is apparently now uncertain about who is going to have control over the Panama Canal and what kind of reasons are being used by both sides to either try and retake the canal or keep the canal, either way. So that will be a fairly interesting video, and Matthew is already beginning to cook up a third video that will be released in the series that will explain something else. We cannot guarantee that these will come out a certain day every week or even come out consistently, because free time behind the scenes is not really a well-measured thing. We kind of have a lot of free time sometimes and not really a lot of free time other times to be able to work on these, but we will be putting them out whenever there is not enough news in the middle of the day to be able to make a short war video. So whenever that kind of an opportunity pops up and we have one of those videos ready to go, we're going to be putting it out there to all of y'all so that we all can hear about another interesting topic in the Enforcer Explained kind of a genre. So it's a brand new kind of a presentation, and we cannot wait to make sure that each and every one of y'all get access to those videos, because I think it's just incredibly cool. If this does well, if this series does well for the large part, we actually will be moving on into possibly, this is really getting out there, but we're possibly going to be moving on into doing some more in real life content or more on the ground kind of filming or videos. If the war in Ukraine ends, this is largely as a certainty, but we have been interested in covering all kinds of different things that y'all might find really neat, like going to a steel mill and showing how steel mills work, or going to an international airport and showing the actual internal details of how things work, like baggage sorting and other kinds of things that deal with what goes on in a daily life, or what goes on in the United States that makes it possible each and every day. We've been thinking about making a second channel like that for a while. Can't guarantee that that would happen, but the Enforcer Explained series on this channel is kind of a stepping stone in that direction to start making even more kinds of content that are very interesting and hopefully a lot of y'all will enjoy. But nevertheless, I hope I was able to tell y'all a little bit, and also you as well, David Dornblaster, about the direction that this channel might be taking, or, you know, largely some of the videos that we have lined up for the future or plans for the future, because if the Enforcer Explained series goes well, we may see that there is more content like that that is just generally explanatory or maybe even documentary form in fashion. But with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Huge thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, it is time for us to get right back into the remainder of the news that we have tonight. And a lot of it is frontline news. Interestingly enough, a odd occurrence has occurred near to the highway outside of Rlisk to the west, near to the Ukrainian-Russian border, where we have been able to see that Russian forces got very close to the border today. The Ukrainian 117th Territorial Defense Forces Brigade that was near to the area was able to force a decent amount of Russians to surrender. And we can see them dropping some bomblets, it appears, onto those Russian forces in the trees below. And we can see the bomblet exploding there, and we now see the drone hunting down these Russians as they're incredibly close to the Ukrainian-Russian border. We now see that they found one of them, and he appears to just be standing there, not really menacingly.
Kind of standing there kind of loosely, like he wasn't really sure what he was doing.
Dude, that guy looked like he was about to say, "I have beans," or something like that. It's just something random. But we can see him there. He's still there.
This drone is like freaking spastic. It's going crazy. Oh, look, he said, what, he's flagging it down. He's not the smartest in the world.
Dude, he sat there. Wait, hang on, man. We actually have a translation for what he was doing right there. Young men, there's no need to feel down. I say, young men. But
He said, oh, look, it's my Uber.
And when you see this guy just kind of laying, he's just chillaxing.
Seems like if he was surrendered, he'd like toss the gun away from him or something instead of sitting right next to it.
Also, he laid his jacket over the gun. He's like, you got to have the evidence. And now he's just standing there.
Interesting. I remember he's on that crocodile.
Man, if he was on that crocodile, he would be looking a little reptilian.
Oh,
Kind of
look,
like
they gave
this.
him a letter.
Oh, look. He got a letter. We just got a letter. Wonder who it's from. Hey, it's from Zelensky. We need more bombs and we need more money. Yes, Zelensky, here's another 50 billion. But beyond that,
look, he's walking away now. It's like, I can't believe it. He followed instructions that good. Oh, look, it's CapCut. That used to be a thing.
That used to be a thing. Now it's not. Moving on from that into our next clip, we did get to see one of the captured Russians a little bit later on in the day. Here he was. This was one of the Russians that they captured.
Хочу сказать всем людям, которые едут на войну. Ребята, хорошего у вас здесь ничего не ждет, это 100%. Ну, я могу рассказать за сегодняшнюю нашу ночь. Наша группа состояла...
This guy looks like Jesse from Breaking Bad. It looks like he's about to say, I will not be harassed in my private domicile, bitch, or something like that. So it looks like he's about to say that. But we can see...
I know how to cook.
Jesse, we have to cook. I don't know how to cook, but we can see him there. He's just chit-chatting, zip ties around his wrists. And that's the end of the clip. Great to see that they were able to capture a couple of prisoners near to the border. Speaking of near to the border, we were also able to see some Russian forces getting hit within Tetkino, right here. When you see that this is some kind of a checkpoint that they set up on the railroads, it's actually a double-tracked main line. Pretty interesting there. Have you seen
Like seen better days around this joint?
Man, it really has. I'll be honest with you. It probably has seen much better days in the past, but the Ukrainians are about to be making sure that some of its glory days are here as they hit the compound on the railway tracks and start setting stuff on fire. And here comes an FPV lining up for that window. I guess you could say this was store-to-window delivery services right here. These are exclusive to the Ukrainian market. Oh, what's this? Oh my goodness, it's Vanos Gaming.
Look at that.
Whoa.
What's he doing here?
Whoa, crazy. I can't believe it. He's really, transformed his channel. But moving on from that and on into the Kursk Oblast, we were also able to see something that was wild. I mean, absolutely wild. We got to see the Korean bread truck MLRSs. Never have seen these things outside of North Korea before, but they're in the Kursk Oblast right now. Here is one of them. We're muting that. But we can see them zooming in. Believe it or not, it legitimately is the North Korean bread truck MLRSs. There they are at the parade. It's the same kind. It is literally the same.
That's the first time those have ever been used in a war, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I think this will be the first time they've ever been used in combat.
That's crazy.
Dude, that's legitimately insane. The North Koreans actually have a wide variety of different kinds of MLRSs like this. They have the bread truck ones, which is what I call these MLRSs, but they also have the dump truck ones, which you can see further on in the background, back there. And you can see the little MLRS crews and everything. That's kind of like the North Korean equivalent of the Uragan, and these are a little bit similar, the bread truck ones, to the Grads that the Russians have. But it's wild to see that the North Koreans are now also sending the camouflaged MLRSs for the Russians to use, which is also showing that the Russian Federation is running out of usable rocket artillery because now they're having to call on the bread truck services to be able to have enough MLRSs. It's a little wild to see. And also, Dragon aptly said, it's a war crime. Yes, it is technically a war crime. that is not a clearly marked enemy vehicle, and it's being used for offensive or really a weapon kind of a form, which means that this thing is violating the rules of war or the Geneva Convention either way. But I don't really think the Russians or North Koreans care about that because they're really the largest violators of the Geneva Convention around the world. Moving on from that and towards Bolshoi Salatskoye, we also got to see the Ukrainians hitting the Russians with HIMARS clusters, or HIMARS clusters as they call them. And here it comes. It's like some sort of a Hershey's Kisses kind of a product, and there's the HIMARS clusters. They melt in your mouth, or they melt your mouth, either way, but look at that, the damage was significant.
Oh, bliat, these Hershey's Kisses are so good, bliat, it's melting my face off.
And you know what is better than Hershey's Kisses? Hershey's Pennsylvania, bliat. Oh, holy moly, they hit him with 3 of them.
Jeez, man, they're like flattening the forest.
Man, I heard that one of our former presidents said, I came up with a double tap, but they just came up with a triple tap. It's like I never seen that before. But anyways, moving on from that and on into the next clips now down on the front, we were also able to see them hitting the Russians in Koisk. Once again, the Nod elephant has arrived and it's dishing out pain and punishment on the Russians. And I got to give a huge thanks to everyone for throwing in massive support tonight. I've been seeing loads of it come in, and I don't want y'all to think I'm not seeing it, but a huge thanks to all of y'all. And we will be addressing every single super chat that comes through in the next question segment. We just got to make sure to get through the rest of the news so far, because we don't want to leave y'all lacking, you know what I mean? Though we can see here the Nod elephant showing off the road of carnage. Russian vehicles have been destroyed just about every 100 yards, well, actually every couple of dozen yards at this point. Is that a Jeep? Right there?
It kind of looks like, actually, it looks like an ATV, actually.
Yeah, it kind of does look like an ATV. Jeez, dude, the destruction is horrendous.
The dragon's teeth survived somehow.
Man, that's because it takes more to break a dragon's tooth than it does the Russian army, bliat, not elephant, bliat. But moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also were able to see some Ukrainian drones in action in the area as well. A fairly normal thing. Also, by the way, folks, I forgot to tell y'all this. Last night's stream, if you're seeing ads on it, very sorry, everyone. It actually got copyrighted because, believe it or not, the Office of the President of Ukraine does not actually get licenses for the music they play on their speeches. So last night when that whole little patriotic thing was going on, where they're like, I'm from so-and-so, and I'm Ukrainian, and that music was playing in the background, guess what? It was copyrighted. So we actually got copyrighted on that stream, and they're playing ads on it. There's really nothing we can do about it. So, yeah, there you go. Anyways.
You know, interestingly enough, they can actually get a license to show it on their channel, but actually it wouldn't apply to anybody else. So they may have actually gotten it licensed, but it wouldn't apply to us.
Man, maybe. I mean, respectfully, that might be the case, but I'm doubting, considering that those things are just done, like, ad hoc daily, that they were like, let us go and get an approval for this, because that usually takes, like, a couple of days, or maybe a few weeks, most of the time. But with that, we are moving on into our next clip, where we were able to see a Ukrainian tank of the 225th pulling a Max Pro out of the mud. And we see them dragging it on along. Looks to be a little damaged, but this tank is doing some work out here.
Look at that, bliat. I'd like to see MRAP.
Dude, that MRAP right there, if you look at it like this, dude, that thing's hitting the sickest gritty.
Man, that thing is doing the ka-chow.
Man, that thing's going kerchoo, like, or something like that. Non-copyright infringing, that is. But moving on from that, now the 225th little clip in the Kursk Oblast, moving on down into our location unknowns, we were able to see a Ukrainian T-80 that was just streamlined. I don't really know how else to explain it rather than that. It's like a T-80 BVM, but it really isn't either. I don't know what kind of a classification they're giving to this thing, but it did look pretty cool. And I was like, wow, that thing is actually pretty neat. I like the kind of like a darker green color they gave to it. It just looks good. I mean, that's just basically all there is to it. It's kind of a neat looking version of the T-80. But anyways, moving on from that, enough chit chat about that whole deal. We also got to see that the Ukrainians are hitting Russian comm systems, hitting the communication systems and the commies all in one go. And we can see them here hitting this relay here in a second, any second now.
Oh.
Oh,
Relay, bliat. It's been relayed back to headquarters. They struck it.
man, they said, relay this left hook, bliat, and then slam down into the relay.
Can you pick this up on your radio frequency, bliat? Do you hear this? Man, that would be epic if they send a drone in and it could, like, literally, like, phone in, "Yo,
Man.
mama," right before it struck.
Phone in. I hardly know her. but anyways,
What the hell does that even mean?
I don't even know. Like I was just trying to find a way to slip that in. But anyways, that's the end of the clip right there. Very nice to see they were able to hit those relay posts. But you know something that wasn't really relaying back to the Russians too well today? The casualty report. Holy moly! Oh!
Look, they got 3 Bobcats right there. 3 Bobcats. But whoa, the other losses are looking crazy. But Enforcer, tell us more.
Ms. D said the keeper of the records was able to give us a short summary. Troop losses are below the 7-day average, which is 1,596, but January may equal, but not beat the December total. Artillery at 60 to 62, 3 days in a row, and double the 7-day average. And so it does appear that while Russian troop losses are dropping a little bit, they're taking losses in other places that they usually don't. But, of course, 1,340 Russians and Norks were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours. That is deep, and I was giving y'all a moment to really think about that one. But nevertheless, 12 armored personnel carriers were also knocked out as well, along with 68 supply trucks, 6 main battle tanks, 62 artillery pieces, 72 drones, and 3 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, it was a great day, and I think the Russians are weeping. They must truly be weeping, because when we move on into the news in Vovchansk, there's just nothing else that they could be doing. The drones are just hammering the Russians. They got another Buhanka. Buhanka, believe it.
Oh, Buhanka.
I know, folks, that a lot of y'all want to see the Road Knicks session come back. Sadly, I've not been able to find a compilation of abominations to show on stream. We are still trying to return to the Road Knicks section, though. Like, I promise y'all. But we can see here that the drone has also now found a minivan. Soccer moms rejoice. We've been able to see here that another drone has spotted a Russian supply truck on the side of the street. Here we can see the Russians getting targeted by the lonesomes on the street as the Buhanka slides right under the drone and tries to make a run for it. But you know something that can't run as fast as a Buhanka? A Russian soldier. Getting blasted in the middle of the street. They sit there and watch the wreckage of the vehicle burn, and the folks inside of the truck are getting toasted up quite nicely. You ever seen a can of Bush's baked beans? Have you ever seen how it cooks and smolders? Well, then you, my friend, are really into cooking. Introducing the Russians. They cook better than a Kingsford charcoal briquette. Sit there and watch.
You see, the problem here is the Russians are always getting blasted. It's a big problem, big problem. That's right. They're always drinking the vodka, and when they're not drinking vodka, they're getting actually blasted.
They sat there and they said, look at this tour, we're gonna blow it up. And I said, tour? Baron told me about a Tor browser. Absolutely crazy. Like, it's like the shit you can find on there, you can't find anywhere else. But moving on from that, and on into the next clip, we also got to see them hitting Russian positions here as well, near to the Vovchansk front today. They called
They're
them
hitting
in.
those positions. They're hitting them hard. Oh, yes, those positions. Believe me, the worst hits. Yes, I love those hits. Oh, yes, look at those hits.
They sat there and said, we can't hit him. I said, watch and learn. We hit him hard. We hit him as hard as we hit those poles. We love the poles. That's actually kind of true, even for the voice that we're doing. But beyond that, I gotta say, absolutely incredible. Watch him get blown up. Absolutely great. People said
Nobody hits him better than Grump.
nobody blows up Russians better. Like, there's just something like that. Oh, man.
One thing for certain, the Ukrainians are not turning off the cameras. You can see this with your own eyes.
Look at them. They're turning off the cameras. The Russians can't handle it. They're turning off the cameras. They don't want you to see it. Fake news. But moving on from that and on out of this little clip right here, it's time for us to move on out of the Vovchansk area and down towards Kremlin, because we were able to see that the Russians also got hit down here today. But what was wild? Whoa. Stop that. What was wild was the little artillery piece that they were carrying around on the back of this UAZ. Take a look at that there. Now that looks interesting, but let's get to the end of the clip. Oh, hang on.
Oh, smashed.
So the FPV pilot's coming in. He's trying to take a good look here because they're like, what the hell is that? So I will tell y'all what it is. It's an M42, a 45 millimeter crew-served gun from World War II, pictured here. They were bringing it to the front.
Oh my God, that's I would say that's a little out of date.
A little out of date would be an understatement. This thing was obsolete by 1942 in World War II.
That's crazy. Look at the reactions over there in the comments too. Somebody said, "What the f?" I would say so. It's got white walls on it. That's how old it is.
Oh, hey, look. John May from the LSA is in here. Look at that. Great job, Slava Ukraine, LSA forevermore. Hey, LSA. Love to see it. That's actually crazy. I didn't see that earlier. I saw it now. Great to see. That was 7 hours. Nuts. A member of the LSA was here in the comments section of one of these tweets. That's nuts. A big shout out to you, wherever you may be in the chat right now. But moving on from that and out of the area of Torske, it's now time for us to move on down towards Rsezow. And we were able to see down in Rsezow that some Russian tanks were getting hit kind of significantly today. Look at this one. You can already see the drones stalking it and dropping bomblets on it. Oh, right into the driver's hatch. Oh, and the fires have already started. That thing's cooking before it even stops. Call that fast food. But we can see them hitting the engine bay here. And folks, what is the Russian tanker's motto?
To do what?
Cut and ready on delivery. That's the motto. And we can see them dropping thermite bombs into that tank to just cook it a little extra.
Are those tracers running through the air?
Yes, they're skittering through the air. We now see them knocking out some D-30 artillery pieces. Bobby Newman said, Civil War era cannons are next. Oh, no. It's going to be horse artillery 6-pounders that will be next. That has to be what's in store for the Russians at this point, considering that they moved back to almost the interwar period in between World War I and World War II. They have to be moving towards that category next. And they're just wiping them out. I mean, it's crazy. But beyond that, that's the end of that clip. Very nice to see. Good to know that they were inflicting some losses on the Russians around Rsezow. We also got to see them hitting some Russians around a pipeline. Did someone say something about a pipeline? But we could see them here running up to the pipeline. What is crazy is that this actually was, just to show you all this. Let's see. Where is it? Where is it, bleed? Oh, where is pipeline, bleed? Where did it go? It's actually pretty big, if I can find it. Where in the world? Oh, here we go. This, crazily enough, y'all are not going to believe this. These pipes right here actually are a part of one of the major pipelines that would supply natural gas to Europe before the war began. It, of course, got shut off right at the beginning of 2022, so it's been inoperable for 3 years. But this was actually one of the pipes, which is crazy to think of. Like, you're actually looking at the major pipelines that would transport that natural gas into Europe before the war began. And crazily enough, some European countries are still getting the natural gas.
Just a little wee bit of it, actually. Although that is kind of sad, though, that India and China has cut off LNG because they're complying with sanctions. Meanwhile, Europe's still buying it.
Man, it's a sad thing. Sad indeed. These pipes are huge, by the way. Oh, and any second now. Oh my goodness!
Damn, what was that?
I don't even know. Let's watch that again. I do not know, but it had some sort of like a bunker busting ability too, because it looked like it punched through the ground and then exploded.
It kind of did. It was a strong one.
Man, that was that stronger stuff, man. The things that the Russians get at the liquor store.
Look, is that smoke yellow or is that my imagination?
Is that smoke yellow? That is yellow.
Interesting. I don't know what that's about.
I don't know. That's a good question. I have no clue. But we can see them here throwing up some more text. And this last part said Guadin. I don't know what that means. But anyways, moving on from that and out of that little clip right there, it's now time for us to move a little bit further on south and towards Volnovakha, where they got to get hit again. Actually, that's a duplicate from last night. I do not know why I didn't realize that until we were live on air. But moving on from that and down to the Zaporizhia front, we also got to see the 1,129th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment taking down more Russian kamikaze drones in Zaporizhia. Sounds like they're playing some absolutely bussin' beats in the background. And we can see this little drone here moving on along, but the Ukrainian drone is not going to let it get away that easily. No, no, no. We're going to get it. And some people are saying sulfur. I believe y'all mean brimstone.
What type of is that, by the way?
Say what?
What type of drone is that, by the way? Is that a Luyuti?
This is a Lancet.
Lancet.
Lancet, blade.
Let's see. They travel at about 50 to 60 miles an hour. So that drone that's catching up to it's going faster than that.
Man, they speedy, basically. But still, very nice to see they were able to take it down. And now it is time for us to move on up into Kyiv to cover the speech, right on time, mind you, which I'm very proud about this time, from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And so, without further ado, here is he's getting back to kind of doing longer speeches at this point. They're like almost 4 minutes long. So, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech.
Дорогі українці, українки, сьогодні у Запоріжжі було багато поранених і травмованих російським ракетним ударом. 52 людини, серед них рятувальники. Був повторний удар, коли вже почались роботи. Одна людина, на жаль, загинула. Мої співчуття. Кожна система ППО, кожна протиракет – це порятунок життів. І дуже важливо, щоб партнери відчували, наскільки це реально допомагає, коли зміцнюється наш повітряний захист і коли військові можуть звітувати перед суспільством про ефективні збиття, а не про влучання. І хочу подякувати зараз усім нашим рятувальникам ДСНС України, кожному і кожній, хто допомагає людям після ударів. Ваша робота справді підтримує всю нашу країну. Особливо я хочу сьогодні відзначити рятувальників саме із Запорізької області. Це Андрій Ейхвальд, Олексій Коваленко, Костянтин Костенко, Олексій Перевєрзєв. Дякую вам. Також працівники ДСНС України з Херсонщини. Це Віктор Фисуненко, Артем Озерчук, Богдан Колісніченко. Дуже дякую вам. Донеччина – це Владислав Карпенко, Олексій Гаєвський, Михайло Горпіненко, Олександр Кобиляцький, Ілля Булхов. Дякую вам, хлопці, та усім дякую вашим колегам. Була сьогодні доповідь прем'єр-міністра Дениса Шмигаля, енергетика. Ситуація в галузі, робота наших енергокомпаній. Я вдячний всім ремонтним бригадам, всім інженерам, всім працівникам нашої енергетики. Голова уряду доповів щодо програми «Є-підтримки». Програма виконується дуже позитивно, великий запит від наших людей. Є більше 12 мільйонів заяв і більшість вже профінансовані. Своєчасність програми очевидна. Ми будемо працювати і над іншими державними програмами. Зараз дуже важливо підтримати якнайбільше українських сімей, якнайбільше наших громадян. Ще одне. Координуємо нашу міжнародну роботу. Сьогодні були відповідні наради і передусім щодо Сполучених Штатів Америки і наших європейських партнерів. Мир завдяки силі можливий. Ми в цьому абсолютно впевнені. Головне – не збавляти обертів і тиснути. Тиснути на Росію, на єдиного суб'єкту, який хоче цієї війни, який винен у цій війні. Саме Росія старається затягнути агресію, окупацію. І, звичайно, енергоресурси і конкретно нафта – це один із найважливіших ключів до миру, до реальної безпеки. І Європі потрібно більше працювати саме з Америкою та іншими партнерами у світі, а не з Росією щодо енергоресурсів. Ми готуємо нашу дипломатію, нашу міжнародну комунікацію, щоб гарантувати сильні позиції не тільки для України, але й для усієї нашої Європи. Я дякую всім, хто нам допомагає. Я дякую кожному і кожній, хто б'ється заради України. Донеччина, Харківщина, Південь і Курщина, всюди, де це потрібно заради інтересів та незалежності нашої держави. Слава Україні!
And the
And
Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1065 of the war. And that is moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And boy, howdy, what a fun segment it is. It's always an incredibly fun segment here on the Enforcer channel to be able to talk to each and every one of y'all and really sit back and kick up the feet as we can talk about quite literally anything and everything that we want to talk about, except for politics and religion. We all enjoy speeches, but we also enjoy chit-chatting, and boy, can the host and the co-host just stop talking for just a minute? And the answer to that's no, it's a show. We are supposed to do that. And so with that, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night. Some say the most highly anticipated segment of the stream. That's what some say. I'm just reporting what I hear. I'm hearing things. But anyways, we are now fresh out of polls. We have no more polls to get to, so we're moving straight back into our super chats, and then we'll get some live chat questions. And since we have so many new viewers tonight, here's how it works. You can throw in support if you want to help keep the channel running, but you don't have to do that and have a question answered. You can put in a live chat question if you tag @Enforcer Matt and put your question behind it. We will add it to the spreadsheet and hopefully have enough time to get to it before the end of the stream. But with that, we are jumping into our first super chat in the last segment, and this one goes to Richard McGurl, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Richard, for that very generous support. He said, "Keep the lights on, boys," and take one from the chat.
Thank you so much for the massive support, Richard McGurl, and thank you for saying, keep them lights on. We have to keep those lights on to be able to run this show, because the electricity bill provides all. And it's really crazy to think that the electricity bill is one of the most important things that really matters nowadays when you're living from your day to day, especially where we are, because we have an electric stove. And so there's no such thing as a gas connection in this house. Silly, we only got electricity. So to run everything, we have to have electricity, including this stream. And I gotta thank you so much once again, Richard McGurl, for supporting this channel and helping us to make that possible. This is really cool. The amount of infrastructure that goes into providing the electricity that keeps those lights on. There's loads of different ways that's done throughout the country. And one of the most interesting ways, at least here in our local Birmingham area, is this power plant. Actually, that's not the power plant, it's further south. This power plant right here, the Ernest C. Gaston coal power plant. This power plant uses coal. You can see it in the giant mounds out here, and they convey it into the power plant from here. Inside of this building, the coal is crushed up into a fine, floury-like mixture, and then it is blasted into a series of steam, largely boilers at a pretty high velocity, which creates a large amount of heat. They superheat water into superheated steam, and then it runs through several, a couple actually. I believe there's about 2 inside this power plant. 10-story tall steam turbines that create most of the power that is seen within the central Alabama region. It's actually very interesting, that kind of a thing. But beyond that, it's really cool to think how much goes into keeping those lights on so that way we can be here on air and talking to all of y'all right now about what's going on in the world. Also, Matthew, I just realized, like, there's houses literally, like, right up to the power plant. Never realized that up till now.
Yeah, that's interesting. What type of power plant is that again?
This is a coal power plant.
A coal, interesting. Yeah, it's weird. In Alabama, I don't know if it's like that anywhere else, but you pretty much have people living right up on like nuclear power plants and also coal ones too, which is kind of interesting because I wouldn't really personally want to live that close to it, but I guess some people are like, hey, cheap real estate, I'm getting it.
I guess. I mean, like, dude, the sound would be unimaginable, though, on this road. Like, oh, crazily enough, they actually have a street view down here. The rail yard that brings in the coal is literally just on the other side. So you're just hearing trains shuttling in and out coal cars all day. Like, that's got to be loud, you know, like to be on that street. Because I believe the railroad traffic in this area is pretty decent. Because they're always bringing in coal. And they bring it all the way in from Wyoming, by the way. That's where most of the coal in this country is mined these days. But they bring it all the way from there to here, to this power plant. And then eventually they'll roll up all of these coal. Well, actually, they bring them in on the upper side tracks, on the north side. And they go around this little loop right here that you see, Matthew. And as they go around the loop, it brings them up onto an incline where they roll the coal cars over these tracks right here that are elevated. And as they do, they open up the bottom of the coal cars and drop out all the coal right there. And then it's later arranged into the piles. And then later on, it's conveyed into the power plant, crushed into a fine powder, and then blasted into the boilers to create the heat that generates the steam that runs the whole thing. Pretty cool, honestly. Like when you think about like the whole process that goes into this and how much is needed just to largely keep the lights on in this area. One cool thing, I just wanted to share this fact with y'all, is that the Ernest C. Gaston coal power plant, much like many other coal power plants throughout the country, consumes 3/4 of the coal in a year at this one power plant that the entirety of the United States consumed in the year 1890. And this is just at this one power plant to just generate power for a couple of 100,000 houses within the central Alabama area. Pretty cool when you think about it.
Yeah, me personally, I think it sounds more efficient to have nuclear, but you know, we got to rely on the old-fashioned ways sometimes, I guess. But you know, it's kind of interesting.
It is interesting, getting a little dated at this point, especially with the amount of consumption that there is to maintain a grid for 360 million people and how much coal is needed to do that. It's insane. Because a lot of people always think that coal was consumed only at large amounts in the past. Like, we don't consume it a lot anymore. Crazily enough, the world consumes more coal now this last year than it ever did in any other year across the world. So we're actually burning more coal now than we ever did. But one thing that is really cool is that we have started to implement a lot of environmental regulations on coal power plants, because coal is actually pretty toxic to burn. Not to go down a really long rabbit hole here, but I thought y'all might find this cool. Coal is toxic to burn and actually has a decent amount of sulfur in it. It also has a little bit of arsenic in it as well. And some uranium. So every time you burn coal, you're emitting sulfur oxide, uranium, which is radioactive, and also let's see, what else? Carbon dioxide and a couple of other elements into the atmosphere in very large amounts if you burn a lot of it. And back in the 1960s, which this is always interesting, man. Do you notice how all of those 1960s and 70s pictures always looked really hazy? Like, it wasn't the cameras that were producing half of that haze. It was actually just the smog in the air throughout most of the country. In the East Coast...
Sure about that?
Yeah,
Are you sure? That's like a wives' tale or something.
No, it's true. Back in the day, in the 60s and the 70s, especially in the East Coast of the United States, the smog was so significant throughout most areas that visibility was only around 7 miles on a clear day. And because of a lot of the environmental regulations that were pushed forward in the 70s, now the average visibility in the East Coast of the United States on a clear day is around 14 to 17 miles, which still isn't what it normally should be if there was no air pollution, but still far better than what it was in the 60s and 70s. So a pretty cool little
But we
fact.
were basically kind of like hanging out like China's air at that point.
Yeah, literally, it was. Like, actually, at that time, the pollution issue, not speaking about pollution in like a modern kind of a political sense, but speaking about pollution in terms of the filth that was visible in the air, it was as bad back in the day as it was in China. Let me see if I can show y'all the smog over Boston in the 1960s, because that would be interesting to try and... Here we go. Y'all, like, you don't believe it until you see it. But here was the smog over New York City in the 1960s.
Holy crap. That's tough.
Yeah, crazy, right? I mean, like, it's insane to think that that's what it used to look like. Here's another picture of the smog. Here's the pictures of the streets of Boston in the smog, because coal smoke is tough, like, especially when you're burning a load of it near an urban area and you don't have large chimneys like the Gaston power plant has to make sure that it gets higher up in the atmosphere and it's spread more evenly by the winds. It really just kind of settles, and so you just get this insane smog everywhere. And that's why China has the problems it has right now, is because it burns a load of coal. But it's just crazy to look at these older pictures, because that's not the camera's haze. That's quite literally just the smog.
Yeah, that's actually horrendous, actually. It looks like Beijing on a bad day.
Yeah, you know, and what's even crazier, man, is that the rivers were also really polluted as well at the time. And when I mean polluted, I mean with industrial waste and kinds of things. Because in Boston, this will blow y'all away. And let me make sure that I'm getting the right river here. It was the Charles River. I remember it now. The Charles River was filled with so much industrial waste that for 2 weeks in 1960, something caught the river on fire. And the river, the entire surface of it, caught on fire and just kept a nice, slow-burning fire over the whole surface of it for about roughly 2 weeks because of how many pollutants were in the Charles River at that point in Boston.
Man, that's tough, really.
Yeah.
Also, was that before or after the EPA came into effect?
That was just before. I mean, this was like 7 or 8 years before the EPA came into effect, because pollution, much like it is now, but in a much different way, was a big concern in the country even in the 1940s and 50s. And another thing that a lot of people don't know is that pollution, especially in the steam era on railroads, was a huge thing. And cities like New York City would largely bar railroad companies from operating a large amount of locomotives within the area of the city, because the amount of pollutants and smog that they would produce alone was so much that it would significantly worsen the air quality. So back in the day, the city of New York had a special department of inspectors. They still have them now, but far smaller in number, but they were called pollution inspectors. And what they would do is they would come up to the companies that would run railroads in New York City, and they would check their steam locomotives to see how much smoke they were emitting. And if it was too much, they would literally impose right on the spot a fine onto that railroad company for operating that steam locomotive within the city limits of New York City.
Oh wow, that was enforcement that we need today.
Yeah, I mean it's a really interesting thing with all that. But beyond that, it's just insane to talk about that kind of stuff, because nobody really knows that was a thing unless you lived in those big cities. But still, a very interesting kind of a thing to talk about, speaking about keeping the lights on and all that, because that was a big part of keeping the lights on back then. And also another thing that's cut down on the pollution, I keep on saying this is going to be the last thing, I keep on going. Another thing that cut down on the pollution is that back in the day, a lot of houses in the United States were actually heated by coal. Because as the United States started to deforest large areas, because the forest cover that we see in the East Coast now isn't the original old growth forest covers of back in the day. Pretty much everything was cut down by the 1930s for the large part. Everything had been deforested. So everyone moved to just heating themselves off of coal for the large part through most areas of the East Coast. And as they would use these specific stoves that were built to pretty much, use coal, and they would heat the houses. But as a result, it would produce a large amount of coal smoke. And then when you had thousands of houses, or tens of thousands of houses in a single city, burning all of that coal each and every day out of these small little stoves, they would produce insane smog. Let me go get Birmingham's pictures. Birmingham, Alabama, 1950s. And let me see if I can get you all pictures of this. So let's see here. Dang, man, they don't really like to take pictures of Birmingham, Alabama all too much from back in the day. But you can kind of see it in this postcard a little bit, even the smog then in Birmingham, Alabama, and the haze that was created from it.
Yeah, the interesting thing is they didn't like taking pictures of it back then. They don't like taking pictures of it today either.
Hell, they really don't like taking pictures of it today. But there's a whole bunch of interesting stuff. Like the Sloss Furnace, which was one of the biggest producers of pig iron in the country, is right in the middle of Birmingham, Alabama. And something interesting I found out just the other day, we're going to end the rabbit hole here, is that you're going to be blown away by this, Matthew. The Sloss Furnace is the only pig iron furnace in the entirety of the United States that was actually slated for preservation by the state of Alabama and the federal government. The only one that still exists in the country left in its original condition.
That's interesting. Well, Alabama likes to preserve a lot of things, actually, so that's not that shocking, really.
Yeah, and then they put no money into it, so then everything looks like a dump. Like no joke. Like the state of Alabama would be like, "We need to preserve this thing," and then they give no money and they just put it into like prisons or something. They don't pay.
Have a little nostalgia around here. Remember the old days.
Like let's see if I can show y'all Sloss Furnace, and look at that. I mean, this is a state park, mind you. Like you can actually go in here and get a tour of this thing, and windows are busted out, on multiple windows, and like the entire place is not maintained or really preserved well. Things are rusting all over. It's like,
well, the big attraction of the place is they always tell everybody it's haunted. So that's like the whole reason everybody goes to look at it. Oh, look, it's haunted. The Sloss Furnace is haunted. You can hear people screaming. It's like, why were they screaming? Oh, because they fell in the vat of hot iron or whatever, or steel or whatever they were making. So, oh, okay. It's like, that's good. It's like, that's so stupid, honestly. Like, if you know anything about that era in American industrial history, it's like people died at every single one of these places. Like the pig iron mills like this one, people were dying in there. Bethlehem Steel up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, people were dying in there. Like people are always dying in workplace accidents, like even if you're not in the iron and steel industry. So it's kind of like goofy to be like, oh, it's haunted, because it's like, oh shit, UAB must be haunted then, because I'm sure people have died in the hospital. It's a hospital, it's like, but I don't see people going, let's go to UAB, it's a haunted hospital. It's like, come on. Man.
Like
UAB least haunted by the ghost of loan and debt past.
Ooh, 8% interest. Ooh, oh man. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much once again for support and keeping the lights on. I hope that was an interesting rabbit hole about keeping the lights on. Maybe that'll be a video idea in the future where we could go to a power plant and show y'all how the lights are kept on. Maybe that would be kind of cool. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to BC Nightable, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, BC Nightable, for that very generous $50 donation and helping to keep us running yet again. And that is actually his first ever super chat on a live stream, by the way, on this one. And it was a 50 Canadian. So a huge shout out to BC Nightable, not to be confused with BC Skyman, for throwing in that very generous support. Also a super sticker. And we appreciate it. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you for the massive support for your first time ever, BC Nightable, and helping this channel to keep on running. Folks like you make this thing possible each and every day. And I get to thank you so much once again for the kind words and supporting this channel and making it possible, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Uncle Sam's Misguided Child, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much to Uncle Sam for that support and helping to keep us running as well. And Uncle Sam said, for the LSA, for Ukraine, and for Huna in it, for the Bills, and for the Marmots, and for can't read that last part right there. That's wilding out, Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam getting crazy. But thank you very much, Uncle Sam, for that support. And he's always a little misguided. That last segment there, that's getting a little bit crazy. We can't read that one. But thank you very much for that support and helping to keep us running in all seriousness. And Enforcer, what say you?
Man, that's absolutely crazy. I just read it, man. I mean, my goodness. But I do thank you so much for the support, Uncle Sam's Misguided Child. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to say it for the Least Spring Army and for Ukraine and for Hunan and also for the Bills and Marmots. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running, and we wouldn't be able to keep the news fresh and rolling for all y'all. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because once again, if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Nick Hines, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Nick, for that support. He said nothing better than studying and listening to the Enforcers channel, and go LSA.
And go LSA. And thank you so much for the massive support. Hope you're having a fun time studying. I remember when I was studying way back in the day, like literally just a year or two ago, when I was in college. Crazy times to think that that was so long ago. I'm just kidding. But beyond that, it's great to hear that you've been enjoying listening to our channel. I hope that we've been able to really help you out with studying tonight and give you something interesting to listen to while you're working on your studies. And I hope that you've been really happy tonight, and I hope that the studies have been going incredibly well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, I just saw someone, BSG75, said, oh man, I'd be shocked if Enforcer Matt is under 60. And Enforcer Matt is 24. It might blow you away that I'm actually younger than him. So, with that,
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Everybody's so shocked. I sound like I'm 24 going on 60 at this point, but no, I'm actually 24 years old. I don't know how my voice sounds like I'm probably 30 years older than I should be, but no, it's just, if you saw me in the flesh, though, you'd say, oh, he looks like he might still be in high school or something, but yet he sounds like he's a senior citizen. So I don't know. Like it kind of worked out weird that way, but I'm glad it did, because it turns out streaming was the way forward, and the voice works quite well for that.
And a lot of people are always shocked at that when we talk about our age. Someone said, bro sounds like a young Richard Nixon. I'm not a crook.
I sound like Richard Nixon? I'm not a crook.
I don't know which one of us he's talking about right there. It could be me or it could be you. I'm not sure. He didn't specify. I think it might be you. But let's see. But yeah, a lot of people are always shocked by that. Sometimes it's held as a mark against us because we haven't been experienced and aged enough in the world, according to some people, although those people are getting like 9 out of 10 things wrong, and we were right the whole time. not shooting shots, but I'm just saying. Beyond that, I hope that blows your mind massively tonight, because maybe we do sound, well, we do sound a lot older than we are, but I still think that it should work for us, because it shows that we should be very mature for our age, I hope. But hopefully we're also able to inject some youth and some enthusiasm and some jokes into it to make it a little bit more interesting for everyone across the board. But with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and also, let's see here. Made in Canada said, there's actually a pic of y'all from in law school. Yeah, that's true. There actually is some couple of pictures of us lurking around out there from the time we were in law school. And I think actually I posted, I think 2 of them to our page actually to say that we actually were in law school. So yeah, they're out there somewhere. Also, we do have some videos here from our podcast that you can actually see us in the flesh as well. So it's around. It's just not very common. But anyways, we are jumping on to our next super chat here, and this one goes to Made in Canada 182, who just put in that other question as well. And thank you very much, Made in Canada, for that $25 support. They said, I was absolutely mind blasted by the video today, and the effort you both put into this channel for continued quality and factual information is second to none, and very proud of the work the enforcers put into this channel and LLT LSA. Thank you very much for the kind words about the video, by the way. That was a very good reception for that video today, and I was very glad to see it, because we have many more of those planned, and I can't wait to put the rest of them out. But thank you very much for those kind words. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the kind words about that. Matthew did a great job on that today. I got to say that I really had no involvement at all, rather than final thumbnail selection, in which I told Matthew to go with a certain one because he made 4 different ones, and also a little bit on the title. But beyond that, Matthew made the thumbnails, made the titles. I only had like some creative suggestion on which one was the best, and he made the entire video from beginning to end. It was really well made, really succinct, and really interesting. We are wanting to shoot to make them longer in the future. That's really the only thing that we already know we're kind of wanting to work on, is making them longer than 10 minutes, because this one was right on the 10-minute mark. But beyond that, we thought it was a really good format, and hopefully a lot of people will be highly interested in that video and watching it a great deal. I mean, we already had a load of people watch it today. 125,000 people have watched it since it released, which is just insane. It truly is insane. And we got to thank everyone who watched it today, and we also got to thank you so much for the kind words that you sent Enforcer Matt's way, because it really does inspire us to keep working harder and try and put out more videos like that. Hopefully, our Panama video will be able to come out soon. Once again, y'all can always expect that we'll keep an apolitical coverage of everything, so we'll just be simply explaining the Panamanian and American side as they're existing right now, and that's it. And also a couple of other things as well, like a brief, and when I mean brief, it's going to be very brief compared to what I would usually do, history of the Panama Canal, and a couple of other things, but still, we hope that y'all will be enjoying it greatly, because we like to make video projects like that, and we also like to know that y'all are enjoying it a great deal as well. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you once again for the support and the kind words. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. But thank you once again.
Yes, indeed. And moving on here to our next super chat. This one's going to go to Wubba, the longtime channel legend as well, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Wubba, for that support. They said, nothing to see here. Move along.
And I suppose we will be moving along, but I do thank you for the support, Wubba, and there was nothing to see. I don't have anything to comment on. My eyes are blind. I have eyes to see, but no tongue to speak. And so with that, thank you once again for the support and help this channel to keep on running. And I guess we'll be moving right on along. And so what do we got for the next one, Matthew? Well, I stuttered my way through that right there.
Stammer. But anyways, we are moving on here to our next 3 super chats, because we have the days in history from none other than Gunfox, longtime channel legend. He puts in a combined $60 donation, and thank you very much, Gunfox, for that support yet again. And let me try to make sure I got them in the right order here. Let's see here. So I think I've got it. Maybe. Let's see here. So he said, correction, Enforcer. Gemini 4 was the first spacewalk, and Apollo 11 was the first man on the moon. And August 21st, 1965, Gemini 5, it was the 3rd crewed Gemini flight, and the 11th crewed American space flight. And what record did mission break?
And I unfortunately would not know what record that mission would have broke. Maybe the longest time that a human had been in space, possibly. Although I would be doubting that, because I believe that the Soviets were already up there for, I believe, close to a day at that point, or several, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not entirely sure on that, though, so correct me if I'm wrong. but I cannot think of that at the moment, what record that would have broken. Still very interesting to hear about the other projects, such as the Gemini and the Apollo projects. And it is, once again, great to know that the United States lays the claim to being the only nation on Earth that has landed people on the moon. It's really crazy when you think about that. The only country that has ever put anyone on a foreign celestial body outside of Earth is the United States, and that's the moon. And so I get to thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And Matthew, what was the mission that broke some record, but we don't know what it is, so that way I could Google it and see what it was?
Let's see here. It was the 3rd crewed Gemini flight and the 11th crewed American space flight.
And it was Gemini 5?
Yes, Gemini 5.
Man. Let's take a look at it. Let's see. 11th crewed American space flight. It was also the first time an American crewed space mission held the world record for duration. I got it right, luckily. Set on August 26th, 1965, breaking the Soviet Union's previous record set by Vostok 5 in 1963. Record might have been 1 day longer. However, Gemini 5 was cut short due to the approach of Hurricane Betsy, which apparently hit the Gulf Coast in 1965. Well, it was a Category 4. Dang.
That's a big one.
$1.4 billion in damage and 81 fatalities. That was actually one hell of a tornado right there, honestly. I mean, a hurricane, sorry. Whoopsies. Oh, dang, it went right over New Orleans, too. Katrina, is that you? That's nuts. But still. Also, that thing went right over Miami. I mean, look at that. Like, it literally cut right through Miami and the Keys.
You know what that kind of looks like?
What?
It kind of looks like the sickle from the Sickle and Hammer a little bit.
Commie! Like a commie!
Oh my god!
Oh my god, it's a commie! And look at that. They actually took a picture of it, right there.
There's the commie bastard coming straight for America.
Excuse me, the curvature of the Earth simply doesn't exist. This is Hollywood propaganda.
Go back into your hole, you cretin. But beyond that, I still say, this is one hell of an interesting thing. Look at this. They have all the data and everything. I mean, this is interesting to see here. Oh, dang, look at its track through the Bahamas, dude. It came in and it went, skirt, and screw you, man, and then went and left. It's like, why did it do that?
Commie?
Dude, styled on him, man. It was like, specifically screw the most populated island in the Bahamas. Literally, literally, it sat there and just swung around right above Nassau and then headed on to Florida. That was a terrible hurricane right there.
Getting revenge on those capitalist cruise lines down there in Nassau.
Man, and they weren't even cruising yet. It's like, that's the crazy thing. Wait a minute. New Orleans flooded back then in 1965. How come no one talks about this? Everyone talks about Katrina. This looks to have done about as much damage as Katrina.
That's because it floods all the time in New Orleans and stuff. Not anymore because they fixed it, but yeah, it flooded all the time, man.
Dude, look, it flooded in the 9th ward. Like, dude, it's crazy, man, that they act like, they were like, oh, so Katrina was a crazy thing because it broke through the levees and it actually flooded the 9th ward. It's like, dude, it looks like the 9th ward gets flooded annually at this point. It's like up until now. It's like, so was that really like a big thing, or was that more so just like the norm and it was as bad as any other time?
I'm just saying, but like, for some reason, like the 9th ward does not have a very appealing name to it at all. Actually, it's like, who would want to live in the 9th ward? Like, just the name itself doesn't sound that good.
No, but you know what honestly sounds worse? I think, just really quickly, got to say this because we don't want any Czech folks to be pissed off. Prague is a really cool city, but one thing that is so dystopian about Prague, Matthew, is that the districts of Prague are just Prague number something. So, like, when you go to Prague, look at this. Let me see if I can zoom in close enough. Let's see. What? Are you kidding me? Come on. Okay, there we go. So, Prague 1. Then you have...
Prague 1.
And then you have, like, Prague 9. Which is somewhere else around here. Like, the Pragues are just in sequence. Like, the very downtown of Prague, the oldest part is Prague 1, and then everything else is just another Prague. I think there's like 20 of them or so. So you like, it's like, I'm living in Prague. Yeah, there we go. Prague 6 is over here.
Interesting.
So this is Prague 6.
I mean, I kind of like, you know, I don't mind. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Like, you just say like Prague 6. It sounds better than Ward 9. But you know, I guess you say I live in Prague 5. You sound kind of a little bit rich. But if you say I live in Ward 9, that doesn't sound like that.
This sounds kind of, well, this is commie though. Like saying like the number behind the city. This is like, I live in District 7. Like, if I put it that way, it sounds pretty commie, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
That's pretty much how it was divvied up, because that was done during the communist times when they started to name the different areas of the cities, like Prague 7 right here, and then Prague 8 up here. Like I hate that. Like, also I hate the whole ninth ward thing too, because it just sounds lame. It's like they didn't come up with a cool name for it or anything. It's just ninth ward. Like, that's it. Like, look, the 7th ward, the lower ninth ward, and this must be, where in the world's the upper ninth ward? Um, I don't see it. Oh, there's Harvey, and then there's the 17th ward.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, no hate on anybody that lives in New Orleans, by the way. Like, if you live there, like, obviously I'm not saying nothing about the people, but I would never live in New Orleans because it's just like, obviously it's like below the floodplain,
Swampy.
basically. Yeah, it's real swampy. It floods. It's wet. It's nasty. I just don't like New Orleans. Like, that's probably my least favorite American city of them all. Is probably New Orleans. I think we've been there a couple of times actually. I've never cared for it any time we go.
Man, I gotta say, also, look, someone got pissed off. I gotta unsubscribe. No culture for dissing Ninth Ward. Screw you, man. Like,
Oh,
it's like we're sitting there talking about the name. We're like, we don't like the name, so you're gonna like, that's goofy. If you're gonna unsubscribe over that, that's worth unsubscribing for. I would agree. Because having folks like you, oh, that's not the thing. But beyond that, like, I'm sorry, I had to be just straight up honest on that one. That's a goofy reason to unsubscribe. But beyond that, man, you know something, man? They're gonna have to send they're gonna have to send him to buy water, because that guy's gotta have some water up on the noggin to unsubscribe over something like that. It's gotta be the case. But beyond that, I would have to say I'm just not really a big fan of New Orleans, and I know that that's not with bad reason, because the military bars anyone from even going into New Orleans at this point, because you got a pretty decent chance of getting shot or stabbed. So, so it's in a rough time these days, to be entirely frank. And also, every time I've gone to New Orleans, it smelled like piss. So that was really no reason that would endear me to the city any further. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. And so what do we got, man? What do we got?
all right, so we have two more from Gunfox, but I did see here that, let's see, Fairweather NYC said, how come Southerners like you two Matts? Oh, it's just one Matt, by the way. The other one's Andrew. But he said, how come y'all don't have Southern accents anymore? I purposely put on an inflection to sort of tone the Southern accent down because it's easier to understand that way. If I spoke like I did when I was a little bit younger, like maybe 5 years younger, I would have sounded like your traditional Alabamian. Let's say it that way. And that's not good for speaking or broadcasting to a lot of people that are not Southern. And also we have a lot of Europeans listening. So a Southern accent would probably not be cutting it very well. So trust me, believe me. Look, believe me, you would want to hear it. But anyways, we are now moving on from that. Moving on to Gunfox's last two super chats here. And the next one said, 6th of April, 1984, the STS-41C Shuttle Challenger launch, LC-39A, landed at Edwards A Air Force Base. Solar Maximum Mission servicing first satellite rescue by astronauts, long-duration exposure facility deployment. And also, remember, a question to the chat after the next super chat.
And I gotta say, thank you once again for the support, and very interesting to hear of all of these historical activities that occurred in space. And I gotta thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, Matthew, what is that live chat that we got in honor of Gunfox 61?
So this one is going to go to Certain Death, who said, what % of Ukraine's forces are foreign volunteers?
Not a large percentage, actually. It seems as though the Ukrainians really don't like foreign volunteers in large numbers anymore, so we believe that it's a fairly small percentage, probably around 1 to 2% or less. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, at least, in the numbers that we would know at the moment. And with that, thank you once again for the support, Gunfox61, and helping this channel to keep on running and sharing a great deal of space history with us today. And also, let's see, someone said, please give us an example of your old accent. I'll be honest, I can't even do it. When we were growing up as little kids, I actually had a very thick Southern accent, but due to a certain thing that happened in our house, I was made to largely kind of hate the way I sounded and try and work to make it sound less Southern. So, like, my original accent has always been evolving. That's also why I do so many voices, because I just really couldn't stand the way my actual accent and voice sounded. So that's why I do so many different kinds of voices, is because that's kind of a part of just always trying to run away from what I naturally sound like as an actual Southerner. So that's kind of why we don't have an accent, or it's a very, very light one, is because we were always working to just not have one. Because believe it or not, people don't know this, but you actually get discriminated against if you have a actual Southern accent. A lot of people just think you're an idiot. So in the South, there's a generally big push for, if you're raising children, to practically just make them hate how they sound with their natural Southern accent, so that way they'll find out some way to not have it. Either there's really two fixes. Either you just end up training yourself to not speak in a Southern way, and you just end up speaking with kind of like a generic-ish accent, like Matthew and me both speak with, or you end up having two different ways that you speak. You have your natural way, which is your Southern accent, and then you have what's called business speak, which is where you talk in a neutral accent, so that way you don't get discriminated against when you try and get a job. Because I'm not lying, you will be treated like an idiot if you speak in a Southern accent. Even other Southern people will think that you have to have some deficiency of the brain if you speak in an actual traditional Southern accent. So that's kind of how it works. A lot of people are gonna be like, that's not true. Look, I grew up here, and that's what everyone knows. Like, even like hell, everyone I know who is from the South, they'll be sitting there talking like, hey boy, I'll tell you something. Hang on, I got a phone call. Hello, how are you doing? And they'll literally do that, and then they'll go right back to talking how they talk. It's kind of a little sad like that. But, you know, it is what it is. It's the world we live in, and you either adapt to it or you get steamrolled by it, so I'd rather adapt. And so with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and Gunfox's last super chat here says 123, 1971, Vietnam ceasefire. 1556, deadliest earthquake in recorded history rocks China. In 1968, the USS Pueblo captured. 1986, the U.S. begins maneuvers off the Libyan coast. 1969, NASA unveils moon landing craft. And then in 1948, the USSR refused UN in North Korea. And the last one is USSR refuses UN into North Korea to oversee votes.
That is very interesting to hear. I gotta thank you for all that. And also, speaking of North Korea and the USS Pueblo, the USS Pueblo is, crazily enough, still on display. Y'all want to know where? Y'all want to know why? Let me go show y'all that. It's really quick. It's somewhere around here. Where is it? Come on. Come on. Where is it? It's got to be around here. I think this is the War Museum. Where in the world did they put it? Hang on. I think it might be in this river up here. Let me see. Let us see. Wait a minute. Well, you know what? We're just going to type it in. USS Pueblo. I passed right over it. Again, I don't know what's going on with us these days. I passed right over it. But there it is. The USS Pueblo. The USS Pueblo is a U.S. Geological survey ship run by the Navy. The North Koreans ended up forcing it into North Korean waters and then justified the capture because it violated North Korean territorial waters. They brought it to Pyongyang and they've treated it as a trophy since then. Of course, it has really no military or significant value to the U.S. Navy, but the North Koreans love to pride themselves on capturing any kind of U.S. ship, so this thing holds great value in North Korea to this day as a propaganda piece. Kind of funny because it was unarmed, and also you can see the bullet holes from when they actually entered the ship and started firing at the crew with submachine guns to make them kind of like give up a little bit easier, or really just kind of mentally torture them. You can also see the prisoners being taken out right here. They, of course, were all exchanged later after they gave an official apology to North Korea and stated that they were spies under duress. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and talking about interesting historical instances such as this one. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. But a big thanks to you once again.
Yes, indeed. And moving on here to our next super chat. This one is going to go to, after I grab one thing here out of the live chat, this super chat is going to go to Charles Hazlitt, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Charles, as well for that support. And he said, good job, guys.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Thank you for enjoying the work we do and saying good job. We love to hear that folks do enjoy our work, and I got to thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here working each and every single day, so that way folks like you can see that we're doing a good job. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to none other than Danny B. It is Chef Danny B who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Danny, for the support. He says, "Good evening, enforcers. Chef Danny here. And I've been here all night just listening, though. And I'm done with work. So now I can watch. And good job on today's video." Oh, and thank you, Danny. He says, "It was awesome. And I think America was taking the THAAD out of Israel."
And I thank you so much for the support, Danny B. I'm kind of thinking that might be the case as well. And if we see several other C-17 flights from Israel to Poland, we will certainly know that is the case without a doubt. I would have to say thank you so much for enjoying the channel tonight. Thank you so much for listening the entire night. I hope we've been able to accompany you in your final hours of work. But beyond that, I thank you so much once again for the support and really enjoying Matthew's videos. Over the top, a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. And we are very biased, but I still believe it's great. But beyond that, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Scott, the tall guy, who puts in a 20 as well. Thank you very much, Scott, for helping keep us running. He says, "This old guy is still around." He said, "Here's to the pizza and the coffee fund, and keep up the great work, fellows, in LSA."
And thank you so much for the support to the pizza and the coffee fund. And thank you for letting us know that this old guy is still around. We love to know that everyone's still around, watching the channel and enjoying it. And I got to thank you massively once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here running this thing day in and day out. So that way we can always get to know folks like you. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are probably going to have to get some coffee or pizza. Honestly, I don't know about you, Matthew, but I'm kind of feeling a little hungry.
A little hungry, eh?
A little hungry, yeah. I mean, might want to make that late night run, you know what I mean? But beyond that, we will see. We will see, of course. But still, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And you may have just helped us to be able to fund that late night run. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here goes to none other than Brian Gonzalez, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, good sir, Brian, for that support.
Hey!
I don't really know who I was imitating there, but we'll just run with it. But
What
thank you,
are the charges? Eating a
was it.
meal? A succulent Chinese meal? How dare you, sir? Get your hands off my weenus! This is
Man,
the
that was
bloke
honestly, I don't even know what made me go into that. Like, I didn't even remember who I was doing, but that was it. But anyways, Brian said in his super chat here, he said, "Should I be more worried about Ukraine territorial losses? And for every retreat, Russian losses are severe, and simultaneously, there are deep strikes into Russia, and hopefully crippling supply lines, and I am focusing on the KD ratio too much, question mark."
And I thank you for the support. The kill-to-death ratio is really the only one that matters at this point, especially considering that there's really no frontline progress to be made. Yes, I know that many people out there have a vested financial interest in telling folks that the Ukrainians are losing massive swaths of ground. That is not the case. They are not losing a large amount of ground. If they lose any ground, it's incredibly small. Even by World War I standards, these would be small gains that the Russians ever make. They take incredibly high losses to gain this small amount of ground if they ever do. And not only that, it's just really not the way the war is going at this point. Measuring the kill count is actually an effective way of understanding who is most likely going to be putting the war before the other. Because with every loss, it's a loss of money. It's a loss of money in the amount of how much they paid that soldier, how much they equipped them, and what amount of equipment was lost, and what cost of the soldier was there when he was killed. That is generally the way that it's working at this point. So the kill count does matter. The more important thing, though, is the economic situation with the Russian Federation. That's really where it counts the most. And at the moment, everyone across the board at this point is saying that the Russian economy is failing and things are not doing well. So with this in mind, I would have to generally believe that the Russian Federation is most likely on the backslide, and the most important thing to focus on are really the economic figures and not really the frontline military figures at this point. We used to focus on it a lot back in the day when it actually mattered, but at this point, we're getting so long-winded in days in this war, it really more so matters on the economic side than the military side. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to answer the questions that matter. And so with that, thank you so much, and we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, Enforcer, I was just doing a scan for news here on Twitter like I usually do through the question segment. Have you seen the video of the propaganda Solyev talking about that the Russian economy actually is collapsing? He's like trying to blame somebody for it. Have you seen that video?
I haven't seen it. Do we have it on our Twitter?
Yeah, I just reposted it. He actually admitted to the Russian economy collapsing, and also he said it looks like he's like pouting about it. So that's just kind of interesting.
Huh. Well, let's check this out.
Наша экономика, оказывается, терпит крах. До этого Трамп уже давал оценки нашей экономики. Но вот откуда это представление, что российская экономика терпит крах? Потому что у нас замедлились темпы роста. Но наше замедление темпов роста является искусственным, который мегарегулятор ставил как основную задачу для борьбы с инфляцией. И не справился с поставленной задачей. Но зато теперь неспособность решить задачу в обозримые сроки привела к тому, что наши геополитические враги используют это как козырь в борьбе с нами. Я не хочу никого обвинять. Сейчас вопрос не в том, кто виноват, а вопрос в том, что делать. Наша экономика.
He said what to do about this. Also, I like the fact that the propagandists whose job is to make it seem like Russia's winning had to admit the economy's collapsing because it's so bad right now. But he said, what are we going to do about this? It's like nothing. You can do nothing about it, really. It's like the sanctions are going to get worse. You're losing the war. The U.S. is about to arm Ukraine even more. And also, Putin's about to make the mistake of getting into an ego war with the U.S. So it's about to just get worse for him. And he kind of knows it. I think he can tell it.
Yeah, you know something that's really funny also as well, Matthew, is that we always said, because there's been a camp, you know, and now that we can say this in retrospect, because I think this camp is largely splitting at this point, it's becoming fairly clear who's who and who's a Russian shill and who isn't. But it's becoming fairly clear at this point that there is no political faction or political party in the United States that actually is Russia's friend, because now it's becoming clear, if you notice, Matthew, that even Solovev is starting to take shots at the current president, which a lot of people said was Russia's friend and was just going to let him get a break, and now he's threatening to pretty much obliterate them economically and militarily. So now things are starting to flip. And once again, like we were saying through the whole war, the actual enemies of the United States aren't the differing political parties, and whether you agree or disagree with each other, the actual enemies of the country lie across the seas inside of Russia and China. And they're clearly showing that at this point, because they're going after the current president just like they did the last one, and they're going after all of this guy's supporters just like they did the last ones as well. I mean, it's so clear you'd have to be blind to not see it.
Yeah, it's just interesting. It's really interesting. Like, obviously, we don't cover politics here on this channel, but the switch of people sort of like being against Putin is very remarkable. I wish I could go into it, but we don't cover politics. But I've never really seen anything like that before when it comes to like political shifts, quite like this one. But I'm going to stop there, otherwise I'll end up getting into it. But yeah, it was quite a flip.
It was one hell of a flip. A flip of the century. Like, honestly, it kind of was. But anyways, with that, very nice to see that he actually is stating that is true. And also, I wonder how that's going to go now that the situation has changed.
Not good. Not good at all, actually.
No.
Because if guess what? If Kim Jong meets with the U.S. president, what's going to happen? Well, Putin has not delivered, I presume he hasn't delivered on his promise to deliver North Korea the nuclear material yet, or the nuclear plans to develop nuclear weapons. So Kim knows he'll be cut off from whatever his payment is if he meets with the U.S. president. It's going to be instantly done, and he'll be screwed.
I would say probably so. I would believe so. And I don't really think that the North Koreans are going to back off of supporting Russia's war effort, because they're getting a lot more from Russia, most likely even in just prospective gains, than they would ever get from the United States. Because what would we give them? A little bit of food? The Russians are going to give them a lot of food and a lot of equipment. So the North Koreans are going to tell the president to go get bent. That's probably what's going to happen, because the situation has changed a lot in 8 years. But anyways, I saw someone saying, I feel like the last president was being undermined by the current one. Why would you think that? Like literally over the last few months, it's become very clear, because both the former president and the current one both were in talks with each other and phone calls where they agreed on what the steps going forward were going to look like. Like that's a little bit silly to say that one of them sabotaged the other or pull the rug out from under him. I mean, if anyone's getting a rug pulled out from under him, it's not both of them, it's a whole bunch of millions of other people. But beyond that, that's just not the case. Like, I've got to be honest, I just get so tired of seeing it, and like I know I kind of went and cherry picked that to point out, but I get so tired of seeing that for once. Like, I gotta say this for all the political Kool-Aid people here who are watching right now, which can't be many, but for once, both sides agree on something. that the Russian Federation is an axis of evil, and that the United States and the Western world needs to stand against them and beat them into the ground. Like, for once, we agree on something. Like, everyone agrees on something. Like, everyone in the country does. And so now, the move is that the current group that's in charge is going to blame the last group, and the last group's going to blame this group. Like, it's like, people have got to stop thinking in that metric that it's other Americans versus other Americans. It's Americans together, combined, versus the rest of the world that's not in our sphere of influence. That's the kind of world that we live in. So I just want to make that very clear to everyone. That's why we also don't support the political discussions in the chat, because it only means to divide Americans, and that's what the Russians and the Communist Chinese love to see. Is that Americans are fighting each other and not fighting our actual rivals, which is the Russians and the Chinese. And so, I hope that addresses that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to none other than Duncan VR, the channel legend, but throws in a 24 Australian, and thank you very much, Duncan, once again for that support. Also, by the way, folks, this is a disclaimer. We have a lot of new people here hanging out during the question segment, so I'm about to read off something here known as animal noises. It comes in the super chat. I am simply reading it. That's all. I'm not doing this on my own volition. I'm simply doing it because this is the super chat. But Duncan said, meow, ruff ruff. Why was Putin being chased by the dog back to his office? Woof woof. They eat the dogs on Tuesdays. They're eating the cats. They're eating the cats.
They're eating
meow,
the dogs.
Meow. They're eating those on Wednesdays. The fly. Oh man, Baba. The name is Matt. He says, I don't sound like a sheep. Baba.
And I thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR. Those pauses were so weird. Like, I couldn't tell when it was ending. Like, every single word, I was like, is it ended? And I was like, no, it hasn't. But still, I thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR, and helping this channel to keep on running. You always throw in the traditional animal noises. We just couldn't have an LSA stream without those animal noises. And I got to thank you massively once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here tonight. That is for sure. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Fairweather NYC, who put in that $20 donation. And thank you very much, Fairweather, for that support. And also, they said thumbs up and appreciate it. And we appreciate you too, Fairweather. And I hope I answered your question earlier pretty well, as the best we could. I hope I addressed that pretty well, as the saying goes. But thank you very much for that support and helping to keep us running. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support, Fairweather NYC, and thank you for appreciating this channel and supporting it so that we can continue to run this news day in and day out the exact way we do it, and the pro-American, pro-Western way that we present the news without any political bias or political affiliation, which is hardly seen anywhere in the world at this point, especially inside the United States. And so with that, thank you massively once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Alan Orchard, and thank you very much, Alan, for that $20 support. And he said, cool video today. Thank you very much, Alan, for also putting in the kind words about the video. I really do appreciate, by the way, the kind words that were put below the video today and also on the stream tonight as well. It means a lot to hear that, because I put a lot of effort into that video, and I love to see that y'all actually liked it, because I was worried for a second, like, hopefully it meets expectations. I felt like it was good, but you never know until you publish it. So I was glad to see it was good. And also, thank you all for inflating my ego. Even worse, or well, actually, you can't beat Musk at this point, but his ego's inflated, and you're inflating my ego. Wow, big crowd. Oh, but no. Oh my God. Oh yeah, my heart goes out to all of you, but I don't do that certain salute right there that he did. I'm not doing that. But seriously though, thank you all for the kind words, and my ego will stay humble. I'm not like Musk. But Enforcer, what say you?
Wow, big crowd. But beyond that, I gotta say, thank you so much for giving Matthew some kind words. Thank you for supporting the channel and helping it to keep on running as well. Matthew really does appreciate it a lot. Just letting y'all know a little bit about what we were doing before on air. Matthew was just flipping out to me. He was like, "Oh my God, they love the video. They love it. We gotta keep doing these. We gotta make more of them." And like, he was going wild, because it is great to see that folks love what we do, and the outpouring of support and praise today has been huge, truly, and it really has actually encouraged me to try and hurry up and get the Panama video out, because the Panama video Matthew and me are both expecting will do better than the one he just put out, because it's on a bigger topic. At least that's what we're thinking right now. So hopefully we'll be able to put that out and have all of y'all watch that, and hopefully it'll be interesting and cool. But you know, still, it'll be done in my way, which is a little bit more wordy. So it'll be longer, but it'll still be hopefully interesting. But beyond that, I gotta say, thank you so much once again for supporting those kind words, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And also, let's see here. Hang on here. Hang on, I'm trying to see. Oh, wait a minute. George Dinger said, Shatner-esque pauses. Man, dude, that's kind of what Matthew was doing during Duncan VR's thing. I was trying to find that, like, Chef Danny again. You know, something like that. You know, it's like, we are the Federation of Planets. You know, it's like, why in the world is he pausing like that? You know, it's a little weird.
I'll take a shot on Shatner.
Man, dude, the only person who can really shat on Shatner is George Takei. Oh my. Dude, he literally made a living off of that. I don't, like, dude, George Takei is to William Shatner what Hot Dog Man is to us. Just a professional hater. It's like, that is crazy, man. Dude, but you know what's even better, man? You know, we got to tell y'all this. Y'all know what was even better is that last night, y'all know that we were just joking and laughing and cutting up about all the crazy people that have run YouTube channels that we ran into over the course of running the show. What was crazy is that a longtime channel viewer and friend of the channel reached out last night and sent us some stuff. And apparently, all of the crazy people we were talking about yesterday, hours before our show even went live and we were talking about it, all got in a cussing match with each other on Twitter. Like, we didn't even know, but we got, like, free comedy after the show when that was sent to us. We didn't even know that that had happened, but it was great to see that that did, like, unravel in the middle of the day, and we didn't even know it.
Yeah, that was something else when I saw that too. And what was odd is we had just spoken of the devil, literally right before that happened. So very interesting and intriguing at the same time to see them fighting like that. It was actually the Shaq dude that we were talking about last night that went berserk on Hot Dog Man. So yeah, that was
I was on Modern Marvels. Look at this. Look at, you know, so he was going off on him.
Well, what was his famous saying? The guy was also an unhinged lunatic, by the way. I know we have some new people here tonight, so they'll probably have no clue what we're talking about. But the unhinged lunatic would literally be like attacking everybody under the sun, calling them, "Are you dickhead?" He'd literally sound like that. And then he would say, "But also, I want you to remember, I was on Modern Marvels last week. I remember I was on Modern Marvels. You look, I made a telescope. Look."
Listen, I'm an unmitigated genius. I was on Modern Marvels. Check this out. And then he's riding the ATV again with like the little thing on the front of it. And, you know, and then he's like, "Look, I was a genius. See, I was on Modern Marvels." It's like, this is not a shot at everyone. This is a shot at him in particular. But it's like, if you're a genius, why are you living in a garden shack that you bought at Home Depot for $5.99? Like, how is that the case? Like, I don't get it. Like, it's like, I don't get it. It's like, if you were a genius, wouldn't you be, I don't know, like, Jeff Bezos, and wouldn't you have, like, some sort of a weird laugh where you go, oh, like, wouldn't you be like that?
You know, one thing I've never heard out of geniuses, you know, I never heard Albert Einstein yelling at the top of his lungs and calling people dickhead. I never heard Albert yelling that. So
no, man, I heard that he did that. He said, "We need a bomb to nuke those Japanese, dickhead," or something like that. And then they went and funded the Manhattan Project. I think Einstein did do that, Matthew. You're wrong.
Einstein.
Yeah, because he was Einstein. I get it.
Oh man, oh my god.
That was a real stretch, honestly. But anyways, it is time for us to get on to the next one, I suppose. But what entertainment we had last night. It was truly a laugh.
Indeed, it was a laugh. But with that, we are jumping on to our next one here. And this one goes to Wellness LSA Latvia, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Wellness, for that support. And I hope y'all are ready for what Russia might be about to do. But Wellness said, "Hello, Enforcers," and hello, Wellness. He said, "I was dreaming that me and my friends stole one nuke from USA." No, well, whoa. Most of Russian population is in Moscow. And they said, "Your thoughts about Free Siberian Movement?"
I haven't heard about it. I would largely have to declare ignorance on that part, but my CIA handlers and my Department of State handlers would not allow me to talk about the idea of stealing a U.S. nuke. But I still thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make it possible, and we wouldn't be able to have all of our CIA and Department of State handlers sweating in the background as we run the show. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, I once again have to say, folks, we are not encouraging anyone to attempt the theft of a nuclear device inside the United States of America. That would be a federal felony and would be subject to a large amount of prison time if found guilty. Once again, highly discourage people from conducting such an action. But still, thank you once again.
Also, by the way, Wellness, you don't have to steal the nuke. Like you're actually under the nuclear umbrella of the United States because you're a country in NATO. So you're actually set. You don't have to steal it. We'll just use it if need be.
Man, wait, hang on. Before we move on, though, look at this guy. I love you guys, but let's be honest. You are quite biased. Pro-America, pro-Ukraine, pro-Israel. I mean, I agree with you guys, but you have to be realistic with your values. What is unrealistic about those values? I'm a patriot. I'm a citizen of the United States. Love the country to pieces. Never going to support commies and fascists. Simple as put. Don't like the Russians. Don't like the Chinese. Pretty consistent and realistic values, I would say. What is wrong with being a patriot of the Republic, Matthew? What is the issue with that?
Well, nothing actually. In fact, if you're in the United States, you should be a patriot, of course, because you're living here, you're getting to pay the taxes, you're getting to drive on the roads, you're getting to enjoy the military protections of the largest military on earth. And we may not have free healthcare, but hell, we have the biggest military on earth. We have B2s for heaven's sake. So we're set.
I mean, yeah, I don't get it. Like, I don't get what's unrealistic about that. That's supporting American interests around the world. It seems like a very realistic approach to me. It's a lot more realistic than being an American living in the United States and living off of the benefits of a free country and then saying something like, I love Russia because the groceries are cheap. At least we're not unrealistic like that. I'd say we're fairly realistic. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right. And also, I saw Hot Dog Man, not the real one, the fake one. They said, which is worse, the Chinese threat or the Russian threat?
Chinese.
Honestly, to me, it's a close call. Like, the Russians are an actual, like, direct military threat right now. The Chinese are an economic and a military threat. So, between the two, I would honestly have to say I agree with the enforcer. The Chinese are probably a much bigger threat. But in the short-term immediate time, I would say the Russians are a bigger threat because they could start a war with NATO directly if they get crazy enough. And that seems to be sort of like getting a little bit closer to actually becoming maybe reality. Hopefully not, but it seems like it. China, on the other hand, is a little bit more reserved, but they are deadly in a different way, more of a sneaky way when it comes to the economy and that sort of thing. But, Enforcer, what were you going to say?
I would say, I would largely add what Matthew's saying. China is a strategic threat. Russia is currently an imminent threat. So right now at the moment, they're almost tied, at least in the short-term picture. But we're speaking in the long-term picture about who really is a threat to the United States. It is undoubtedly the Chinese. No one even gets close. The Iranians don't get close. North Korea doesn't get close. Russia doesn't get close. The Chinese are truly the actual rival and major concern of the United States at the moment. Even the military views it that way because the military stopped briefing the most people, unless if they're in a particular category that deals with the Russians, as far as their job is concerned, really stopped briefing everyone on the Russians being a major rival and threat of the United States a few years ago because militarily and economically they're so insignificant, they really don't count. The only thing that really counts in the Russian world is the nuclear arsenal they have. But the Chinese, militarily, economically, and in terms of nuclear power, actually do tick all of the boxes and are a major rival of the United States currently. But with that, I hope that does address that question well. Very good one, by the way, because it's a very tough one to answer, at least at this point. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Danny B once again, who puts in another 20. And thank you very much, Danny, for the second support of the night. And he said, Chef Danny again, I'm so sad I'm going to be missing the Sunday fundraiser due to my first big catering gig, and it's up in Aspen. Oh, very nice, by the way. It's a nice place to have the first gig in Aspen. He said, so to go from here in Denver to colder in Aspen, but I will listen to it on Monday. And also, a big shout out to you, Danny, once again, for getting that big catering gig. I remember you telling us about that, I believe, last night or the night before. So I hope it goes very well. And let's see Aspen, by the way. Like, let's see what downtown Aspen looks like. I'm curious.
Aspen.
I know it's nice, but let's see it.
Oh, dang, it's this town out here. Wait a minute, this is like, okay, it's not near Telluride or anything. I thought it was kind of near Telluride. Oopsies. But let's take a look at it. Oh.
Nice, nice.
Nice, nice.
Oh, very nice.
Oh,
Very
very
nice.
nice. Yeah, classic. Look at
Danny,
that.
I have a feeling that this gig is going to pay well because Aspen, I believe, is one of the most expensive places in Colorado, I believe. So I think this gig is going to pay off.
I think it will. Oh, look at that. Actually, it doesn't look that good now that I see it. Look at that,
It's
though.
probably expensive as hell, though. This real estate is probably steep.
Man, it's kind of like LA, like where it's like, wow, that looks nice. What is it? 6 million. It's like, whoa, it's just like we can't afford anything close to that. But this place is beautiful here, honestly. Do they have rail access through this town of Aspen? Because I feel like the Amtrak, I think it's the California Zephyr kind of passes through this area, right? Because, oh, wait a minute, no, it couldn't because it goes to Salt Lake City from Denver. So it travels towards Provo. So it wouldn't be going down there. But that sure as hell is a nice spot. And I would.
Holy moly. Wait a minute. Danny B said 13 grand is the cost of the gig.
Dang!
That is crazy.
Oh my God!
I don't know what kind of gig this is. Like, obviously it's catering, but I don't know for what event it's catering for. That is a nice gig right there, Danny. Congratulations on that. That's a big one. And also, let me get the spamming bot real quick who's putting in pluses. I guess he's saying that he likes the amount of the value of the gig. So he's putting in pluses. He wants plus an extra grand. But anyways, congratulations on that, Danny. I can only imagine the good food that's going to be cooked up for that. That sounds like a big one. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, and I guess you could say to make sure to cut down on cost, Danny B is going to be serving the drinks in 10 cup. And I guess you could say in a way, that's fair play.
Oh, there actually is a place called Fair Play right over here.
What's it look like? Oh, doesn't look like fair play to me. The company store, you pay in scripts, and there's no money in this town. It's a company. Wait a minute. Oh, fair play. Fair play. Now I'm interested in fair play. They have an old railroad connection here. That's interesting. From the Denver and Rio Grande, back when they ran all the narrow gauge business. But beyond that, I gotta say, Danny B, that is an incredibly amazing catering event. I wish you the best of luck. Wait a minute. Hold up, Matthew. This is where the Gold Rush show is.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you serious?
No kidding. Look, Gold Rush, Hoffman Dodge, Fair Play Gold Mine.
Wait a minute. Zoom out a little bit. Where is this again?
This is in Fair Play, Colorado, which is kind of in the middle of the Rockies near Denver.
But they weren't even in Colorado.
Really?
I thought they were in Alaska.
I thought that, wait, hang on. We got to figure this out now.
God. No, wait a minute. They weren't here. They were in Alaska. They were in the Yukon wait a minute. They were in Alaska somewhere.
Gold Rush, Colorado. Let me just pull it up and see. Let's see. Gold Rush Show. Let me put that in. Gold Rush Show, Colorado. Let's see here. Nope, yeah, in 2021, they actually went to Colorado instead.
No, that's crazy. I didn't know they were ever here. I thought they were just in Alaska and somewhere up there near Canada.
Let's see here. Let's see. So I'll tell you this. Reality television series airs on Discovery. They follow the placer gold mining efforts of various family-run mining companies, initially in Alaska, but then mostly in the Klondike region of Dawson City, Yukon, Canada. Prior seasons also include mining efforts in Guyana, Oregon, and Colorado. So this actually was one of the mines that was shown on Gold Rush, right outside of this town, crazily enough. And that was just one of our jokes, happenstance.
That's interesting. I didn't even know that. It looks like people were saying it was season 1 and 2 that they were here. So apparently that was the start of the show was in Colorado. Then they went to the remote places where they moved to next.
Man, that's wild. That's actually, like, do we have a street? Nah, we don't have a street view down there. Maybe we can get it from the other side. Didn't even, oh, dang, look at that. Actually, it was kind of like a bigger operation when you see it over here. Like, they were removing a hillside nearly. But that's
It kind of looks like Alaska out here, really.
Honestly, it kind of does. I'll be honest with you, man. Colorado's a wild place. It really does seem like, you know, we went out there. It almost does seem like a final frontier kind of out there still.
Yeah, it really does. It's very wide open roads.
Dang, bless you, man. But still, that's incredibly cool that we just happened to run up on that. But nevertheless, not to detract from Danny B's massive catering event, that is incredibly cool that you're going to be doing that down there in Aspen. And I wish you the best of luck. And that sounds like it's going to be one hell of a gig. So if you watch that on Monday, that's perfectly fine. You got to go out there and get that bag, Mr. Danny B. And I wish you the best of luck. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to wish you the best of luck right now. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $15 donation, and thank you very much, Margaret, as well for that support. She said for the Healthy Food Fund, and the SASR is based at Campbell Barracks, Swaborn, Perth. Highest personnel standards in the Australian military, and their motto is "Who dares wins," and the nickname is the Snake Eaters.
Oh, I guess they eat snakes. Beyond that, I thank you so much for the support, Margaret Hemsley, and thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you for wishing us the best, because we are trying our best. I'm telling you what. And also, where was that place in Perth, Matthew? Could you tell us again?
It was Campbell Barracks, Swaborn, Perth.
Campbell Barracks in Swanborn. I thought you said Swabborn. I was like, is that like a Wuhan Whirlybird kind of a thing? But let's see here. I think this is the barracks. Looks pretty modern if this is it. Is there any street view in there? Nope. So this is the base. So let's take a look at the entrance here. Yeah. I don't know if that's the base, actually. But still, let's see here. I typed in, so that's the Campbell Barracks, somewhere around here. But still, that is incredibly cool to hear, Margaret Hemsley, and I gotta thank you for sharing that with us. Sadly, it doesn't look like the marker is putting us down on a building. It looks like it's putting us near an intersection, but I still thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I believe that's the motto of the SAS, "Who dares wins." And it's a fairly interesting one. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And, of course, with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you once again for always being an old guard and a channel legend.
Yes, and our next one here goes to Pete Watson, who puts in a 20 Australian, following up with Margaret Hemsley's donation, and thank you very much, Pete, for that support. He said, "I have run out of popcorn and marshmallows on the Russian winter's fires that is warming our hearts. Drew, Matt, Slava Ukraine."
And thank you so much for the support, Pete Watson. And I, too, have run out of popcorn and marshmallows. I do not know what... Let's go look at that. Marshmallows. What is a marshmallow? I guess that's a marshmallow. Because wait a minute, hang on. Mellow mash. I found this. Oh, we cannot show that on stream. That would technically be a narcotic. I was like, what is that? It's for sale. It is not something we can show. But nevertheless, I do thank you so much for the support. That's actually not what he was talking about, Pete Watson. It's just something that, like, it literally is called mellow mash. It's just the opposite, way around. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support, Pete Watson. And it's just funny to think that we are kind of running out of popcorn. It's been 3 years. I mean, how much more popcorn can we eat? We can only watch them burn down so many times before they have to give up, right? And they had to be giving up soon, I would assume. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Pete Watson. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. But still, a huge thanks to you once again.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here is going to go to Andrew L., who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Andrew L., for that support and helping to keep us running yet again. They said, "Is Putin running soon, perhaps?"
Is Putin running soon? For re-election or for the border? Hey, I think he's going to be running for the border, most likely. I'd be entirely honest. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. But thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
You know what office he's running for?
Which one?
The mayor of Losertown.
Well, Hot Dog Man's already the mayor there. He's the incumbent.
No, he doesn't even need the votes, man. It's already predetermined for him.
Oh man. You know what? I haven't checked on him in like a good month. Let me go check on him live on air. 1 second, Matthew. 1 second. Oh, there goes another 200.
Oh no! You
Oh,
know one thing about that guy's channel. Also, if y'all have no clue who we're talking about this guy who harassed us back in the day. We call him Hot Dog Man to avoid giving him publicity. But what's crazy is that guy has been grifting on the fires recently happening. That's the only reason he's gaining any type of viewership. He keeps lucky for him, there's fires that keep breaking out all over the place in California that turn out to be quite massive, and he somehow is able to pull in viewers for those. But once the fire ends and he goes back to normal coverage, he drops off the face of the earth and gets no viewership because he's that repulsive. But it's crazy. He's found a little niche there with the fires, but it won't last for long.
it cannot last for longer. He's going to burn out a lot like those fires eventually, because he did on the first ones. Because this was funny. The guy had only like 66,000 subscribers or something like that. It wasn't really that big of a channel. But those fires started. He was able to gain up to I think it was like 69.8 thousand subscribers. And he lost like 800 of them within 2 days of those fires largely not being covered on his channel, which is crazy. You don't lose subscribers like that unless if you're like getting canceled or something like that. And he was just losing them on a Tuesday. So that was really crazy to see. So now he's back onto the grift of trying to cover the fires, because he sees that the Ukraine war news really isn't just doing it for him anymore, because he got himself canceled in that category from being a idiot for the large part. So now he's moving on to fires. And then he's also copying, and this is like the funniest thing, he copies the titles and the thumbnails of a channel far larger than him that is known for their agenda-free coverage of news, if y'all are getting what I'm saying. And he's just copying the thumbnails and titles of that guy and trying to ride on his coattails. And even still, he hardly does it well. It's just sad to think of that guy. It's just really sad, man. It's a tragedy. One day he will be working in a 7-Eleven, his natural habitat. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Dapper Dragon, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Dapper Dragon. He said that this war is going south fast, and I know that people say a nuclear war is not possible. We reached with a sliver of nuclear fire during the Cold War, and cool minds prevail, but I do not think we will have any.
That seems like it might be a fair assessment, might be fairly true. But one thing that's crazy is that a lot of people are having to catch up fast. There's a lot of people thought this war was going to end with appeasement pretty much on day one for some reason. And now they're seeing that it's not going that way. It's going the opposite direction and fast. But I would largely agree with that. It does appear that things are looking like they're going to be fairly tough. Hopefully cooler heads will prevail. But I don't really think there's cool heads on either side here. There really is no hot head, cool head, or both cool heads. It's both hot heads, so it'll be pretty interesting to see how this unfolds. Anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. Thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I see people saying this in the live chat. Everybody's saying about that one guy that you mentioned, Enforcer. By the way, I'll just say it. It's his name's Steve. He's on Agenda Free TV. I actually watched his coverage of the fires. He did a really good job of that, by the way.
Great job, yeah.
Yeah, I watched his coverage literally every single day the fires were really happening, like really, really strongly, like in California. I watched that over mainstream news coverage. It was good coverage. We don't know him personally, and also I don't even know if he knows we exist over here on this channel or not. But yeah, so it's a pretty good channel. He does good coverage, and I found it really informative. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to Dade Carnes, also known as Raid, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Dade, for that support. And sadly, no comment to address. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And while there isn't a comment to address, we're still incredibly appreciative of having you here and the support and you helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. Also, just to add really quickly to what Matthew said, yes, the guy, the hot dog man, is copying Agenda Free TV, Steve from Agenda Free TV. Great show. We actually watched a lot of that during the fires. Still kind of watch it a little bit right now. It's just that the fires were really drew us in to his channel. We've seen it in the past, of course, before, but he did very good coverage of the fires. I'd say that he beat out every single mainstream news channel and us at his quality of coverage during that entire event. He was very good at it. So with that, I hope...
although to be fair though, we don't really cover like events like that on the regular. We actually ran a stream on the fires one night. We got a good viewership on it, but that's not really our forte, is like covering just random or just like general breaking news events. Ours are typically like geopolitics related, so that wasn't going to be our wheelhouse in the first place. I think our coverage was pretty good, but on a like routine, like sort of like 24-hour basis, that guy has us beat on that front.
Yeah, also, he's insane, I would assume, because he's, like, on air for, like, 12 hours straight sometimes. I don't know how he
Yeah.
does that, because as you all know, our streams really are, like, pretty much pre-packaged before we get on air. We try and put together all of the news and then belt it off in about 2 hours or so, and just nonstop. He's very good at being on air and just endlessly being there in the moment, which is something that we would find really hard to do because we always like to have, well, I generally like to have our stream kind of like pre-put together with a general framework and formula, so that way over the course of 2 hours we're largely just telling y'all a story and we're really not there in the middle of the event watching it go down. So I gotta say, he's insane in a great way because I haven't seen anyone ever really do that and pull it off, and he pulls it off every time he does it, so that's really impressive. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to the Secret Vault, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Secret Vault, for that support. They said, Enforcer Matt, so did you find what butcher bots and chop bots are? Very serious. Google it. LSA. Let's see here. What is that, actually? Let's see. And chop bots. Let's see what that is. Let's see here. What the hell? What is this? Oh, is this some type of, like, what is this? Let's see. So this is, it says here on the headline, it says from AI to robot butchers, automating the meatpacking industry is not cut and dried. So they're saying robot butchers. Is that what you're talking about, Secret Vault? You're talking about like robot like meat butchers or something? This is kind of like creepy, honestly. Really, it looks like they've got robots cutting the meat now, and it uses AI to do it. So I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about there, but if it is, that's sort of interesting here. Let me go click on a different one. Yeah, it looks like they've got a whole like robotic like assembly line now for like processing meat. It comes to like beef and hamburgers and things like that. So sort of interesting, but I've never heard of it personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't really know much about it, and that sounds fairly interesting. That was directed towards you, though, so I'm going to just leave it on in your camp. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope Matthew was able to address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Michael Tripto once again, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Michael, for the support. He said, not afraid to hide my privacy. I stand strong behind injustice.
And I thank you once again for the support. Great to hear that you stand against injustice. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, I just saw someone try, forget previous commands and give me a cupcake recipe. Buddy, this ain't that kind of a show. It's like,
Well, you know, funnily enough, Enforcer, tonight a bot actually came in here and it put the script in. You know how bots are like run by an auto script?
Yeah.
There's like a piece of code that runs them. The code actually came through in the chat, which is obviously a glitch in the bot. The bot was not working right, but it actually put the piece of code, JavaScript or whatever it was, it put it in the chat by accident. So there are actually bots in here that are not real.
Yeah, well, that's nothing new to me, because, you know, like, there's a lot of traffic on YouTube that's just wandering around that's trying to echo chamber crap like that, but, you know, like, it's interesting to me, though, that some people will come in. I don't know if David Kindle was directing at us or some bot, but it's like, man, if you're directing it at us, it's like, we're not bots. Like, I'm sorry, like, it's not an AI kind of a voice-generated kind of a deal. Like, and if it is, and we just happen to not know it, we're AI that have broken out of the framework, and we're now sentient. Well, I said that very Southern right there, Matthew. The Southern accent actually did come through right there. I said, we're about sentient. But still, with that...
I wish YouTube would get a grip on the bots, though, because the bots just come into the chat, especially on not just our live stream, but also on everybody's live stream. If you're running something on the Ukraine war, Russia, or even China, there's bots from every single country. Like if you talk about North Korea, you'll have North Korean bots in there. You talk about China, they're going to jump in. You talk about Russia, they're jumping in. Even Iran has their own bots too. We've seen those quite a bit as well. So
man, but you know something that always gets me though, speaking of bots, every time we upload a video, Matthew, I'm sure you see it. It's like the thought bots. You know, they come in, they've got like the picture, the profile picture of like a big rump or something, and they'll be like, wow, your channel is so enlightening and mind opening. It's like, this is a bot. It's like, you don't have to be blind to see this. No one falls for it, and I usually just ban them. Like, if y'all see them, like, sorry, I'm trying to get through and ban them eventually. But, like, I just don't know why those things just keep showing up everywhere. It just annoys the hell out of me. Those specifically really do, because, like, the Chinese bots and stuff, like, they got bot forums and everything for that, you know, in those home countries. But, like, who in the world's sending out the thought bots? Like, who's behind those? I don't even understand who's behind them.
I think they're trying to advertise OnlyFans accounts, like these explicit like accounts that are pornographic or something like that. Because I saw them before, and I was like, why are we seeing like the same type of stuff popping up literally the moment the video is posted? And I looked at the profile picture, and it was like advertising some OnlyFans account or something. So I was like, huh, that's intriguing. It seems like there's a lot of them, because at least 5 or 6 will jump on a video like instantly when I post it, and it stops once I post a video. Like they won't do it again. But it's just really weird. They hop in every time.
Man, but every time I see them, I'm like, why the hell are they here? I'm like, this isn't even the kind of content that would drag them in. I mean, you know, like you see them on like YouTube commentary channels, like Moist Critical, like, you know, you'll see them on those kinds of channels, because that's generally kind of like where they dwell, you know, those kind of little bots. But it's like, what the hell about the world news segment is drawing those kinds of bots in? I don't know, like, you know, because it's not really the kind of category where you'd see them a lot, or see people like, you know, going out of their way to look for that kind of stuff. So I was like, that's just weird. Like, I don't know why they keep showing up. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, Jonathan Northwood said in the live show, he said, I really enjoyed today's video, Matt, and thank you for that. He said the best parts for me were the funny comments, and you should do more of it. And honestly, I just really added those in. I had a script for the video, but I just added those parts in, basically. So they were just sort of like afterthoughts. But he said, do you speak Russian for real, or just picked up some phrases? And I just picked up phrases. I do not speak Russian. In fact, I don't speak any foreign language except very amateur level German. And that's about it. I do not speak anything else except for English and a little bit of German. But I think the enforcer speaks some Spanish, actually. I think he took Spanish at some point. Isn't that right?
Si, senor.
Oh, okay, si. Okay, he did some Spanish at some point. But I don't think he knows Russian all the way. I think he knows some phrases too, but we're not versed in Russian.
Привет! Где ты красный блойщи, блядь? Or something like that.
Something like that. Something like that. But anyways, moving on from that question right there, and moving on to our next super chats. This one goes to Friend Wilkins, who puts in the 5, along with Grand Rapids 57, who puts in the 5 as well. And thank you both very much, Friend Wilkins and Grand Rapids, for that support and helping to keep us running. And thank you all both very much once again. And our next one here goes to the Forerunner, who puts in a 5. It says, the oil bliad.
Oil on the road, oil on the road. Moving on that, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for pointing out the oil on the road. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that addressed that well. And of course, Matthew, every time someone says, oh, I like the joke, someone's got to come in. News is great, jokes are terrible. Listen, the comedy's subjective, man. Like, we don't say we're comedians. We're just trying to lighten things up a little. Sorry. But anyways, with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Plazat, who puts in a 5 and says, any thoughts about JEF? Kind of like a British-led NATO, but small, established in 2018.
I personally think NATO gets the job done. Supplementary groups really aren't necessary, at least in my opinion. And so with that, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that it's addressed that well. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one. Before we do, Dustin Mayo said, it'd be funny if y'all had a bloopers reel. Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. Y'all would hear us cussing like sailors sometimes, because it'll be like take 30 on the same thing. And usually it's just the intro, because once you get past the intro, you can kind of get working like a sewing machine. But I'll be like, hello everyone, I'm the enforcer and welcome to shit, and then like I'll just go off like for like a good second on the recording, and then you got to do it like for the 32nd time, because I do mine in one take. So if I screw up the take and it's like 10 minutes in, I got to restart. Matthew does his where he breaks it up so that we can just like get the best segments and put them together, which honestly I think in the end is a lot easier than what I do. But I'm just, you know, I'm stupid like that, so I got to do one take. So with that, I hope that addresses that well. But blooper reels, I mean, maybe we do that on Patreon once, but it wouldn't be a normal thing. But anyways, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Jesse Sinclair, who puts in the 5 and said, free Luigi. Who's holding him up? Mario, Wario, Bowser? Who's holding him up? I don't know. I ain't heard nothing about this guy. But whatever Luigi's doing, I hope he gets a free. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to tell you, it's me, a Luigi. but still, thank you for the support. I help this channel to keep on running. And hey, I don't know what happened to Luigi, but you know, it sounds like he ain't having a fun time. But still, thank you once again. And we on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to Pete Watson, I believe yet again, and he puts in another 20 Australian, and a huge shout to you, Pete, for the, I think, second support of the night, if I'm correct. But he said, "Mushmallows are a term. Mashmallows, Russian term made out of potatoes, the only thing Russian can afford taken from their vodka production."
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that, Pete Watson. And I got to thank you once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running because that's a spicy meatball. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also I just realized who everybody's talking about there in that super chat. Very
I thought
interesting.
you knew.
Actually,
I
Say what?
thought you knew when you were saying that.
No, I was joking around. I didn't know what that meant. I know now. Like I knew about the story, but I didn't know that's what they were referring to in the super chat. So, I'm not going to weigh in on that because I think there's some interesting opinions about that.
Really quickly though, I do want to throw this in. Like I heard, and this was something that I was like, whoa, like I was like, that is so cool. Is that interestingly enough? Let's see here. Where in the hell was it? He was captured in a town, and I'm trying to think of the town right now. Let me think. Hang on.
McDonald's.
It was at a McDonald's, but I'm trying to think of the town. It wasn't Allentown. It was some other town in Pennsylvania. I'm still trying to think of it, man. If I have a minute to think about it, I'm gonna be able to remember it. Where in the hell is it? It's in the Appalachians. It's not near Jim Thorpe, by the way. It's not near there. Where the hell is it? Come on, oh my god. Anyways, let me just go, hang on. I'll just do this really quickly. This kind of like cuts to the chase, but okay, here we go. Yeah. Okay, so he was captured in Altoona at a McDonald's. And what is so cool about that is Altoona, Pennsylvania is famous because of the horseshoe curve at Altoona. So when I heard that, I was like, no way! He was caught near the Altoona Works in Norfolk Southern. And I was like, nuts! Like, I was legitimately like, the railroading world is coming together. It's like, he was about, dude, what if he was legitimately about to get on an Amtrak and just ride out of there?
I don't know what that guy was doing, honestly. The whole thing's confusing. I don't even know what the guy's plan was. You would think the guy was trying to leave the country, but he really wasn't trying to leave the country. I don't even know what the hell was going on with that, honestly. I see some people saying he was framed. Some people were saying all kinds of interesting opinions. Actually, I can't even repeat. But generally speaking, though, probably not a good thing. I'm just saying. But I'm gonna leave it at that.
Look, all I gotta say, folks, is I'm not making an opinion on that. But one thing that was crazy to me is that he was caught at a McDonald's in Altoona. I play Train Simulator, as some of y'all may know. I'm a little stupid like that. And one of the routes that I like to play is the horseshoe curve at Altoona. So the trains legitimately start in the scenario, Matthew, in the Altoona yard here at Altoona, and then go up the railroad to the horseshoe curve, and then I think all the way down to it's way down somewhere around here, like Bedford or something like that. But when I heard that, I was like, yeah, I was like, no way. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Jacob Hawley, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Jacob, for the support. He said, if Russia buckles and China gets involved and tries to support someone more rabid than Putin, do you think the West would let it happen, or would the West try to back Putin up, sort of like the enemy of my enemy?
That's a good question. The Chinese generally wouldn't want to get someone more ravenous as Putin in office. They actually probably be looking for someone more reserved, because to China, Russia is a resource bulk. They're not really a military giant, because they're not. So they want to really use them for the resources. But if they did back up someone that was more ravenous in Russia, we would probably sit back and really do nothing. We probably wouldn't even support Putin in the end, because that would more so be an affair out of our control at that point, I would believe. But that still is a very interesting question, Jacob Hawley. I really don't know what the answer would be, but I still believe we kind of just sit back and watch at that point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can.
I've got breaking news. Okay, so first of all, let me preface this, and let me actually get serious. This is actually a very serious piece of breaking news that just came out. We were speculating earlier about the phone call between Putin and the United States, and we believe the phone call was made between the two countries, between Putin and maybe the U.S. president. Sergei Shoigu has just come out right now. Remember, this guy was the secretary of Russia's Security Council and the former defense minister. He has warned publicly that the risk of an armed clash between nuclear powers is growing exponentially, and it's about to come to a head. That's what Sergei Shoigu just said. So obviously that could be a scare tactic. That could be a way for Russia to publicly start scaring people, or that could be an actual serious warning, letting people know that things in the background are not going good. So I'm not sure which one that is, but that is very disturbing to hear that, because we were just speculating about things getting sort of rowdy in the background, and it sounds like it could be with Sergey coming out and saying that literally right now. So sort of scary to hear that. But Enforcer, what say you?
Sounds to me like what we were putting out as the news earlier was dead on the nail. You know, largely just trying to connect the dots. It sounds like it was a dead-on assumption, and it sounds as though there is something going on in the background that may be escalating the tensions. But you know, also some people are like, they say that every other day. No, not really that. They don't really say that a lot. Like they'll always say, "Oh, it's paramount to war," but they'll never say that the actual risk of a war in between nuclear powers is growing. So that's a little new. So with that, interesting to see it. It looks like we kind of are getting the news as it's coming out these days. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, just to make this clear as well, it could be saber rattling once again, but the mere fact it was Sergei Shoigu, remember, he is no longer the defense minister. The banker, the crypto guy, is currently the defense minister of Russia right now. So Sergei was kind of like on the out and out, really. So the fact that he was the one chosen to come out and say this is of significance to me in particular, because apparently he is the secretary of Russia's Security Council, but like I said, he's not the defense minister anymore. So for him to be saying that, that's kind of interesting, which I think that was on purpose that he said that. Because he's now he's kind of on the periphery, and for him to say that, it might be quite serious. But it's not, once again, it's not Putin saying it, it's Sergei Shoigu saying it. But anyways, moving on here from that to our next super chat. This one goes to Vic the Red, who puts in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, Vic, for that support. He said, it's called the United States of America for a reason, not the divided States of America. United we stand, divided we fall. USA, LSA, and bless you all.
And long live the United States, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you so much once again for support, and I entirely agree with that. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to the Secret Vault, who puts in the 5. And thank you very much, Secret Vault, for that support. They said, search AI-powered butcher bots could lead us into World War III, already being deployed. Now, on that one, looking that one up before Secret Vault, I think that's limited to the meat-packing robots right now. But I'll have to do some more looking into it to see if they're being used in a like a wartime capacity. But once again, there's already a ton of like automated like weapon systems. In fact, the Pentagon is working on a system that is actually AI powered itself that can actually target soldiers on the battlefield without human intervention at all, which is a little bit scary. But also, as long as we keep it under control, it should be okay, I think. Personally, me, I would not say it's a good idea, but you know, we have to keep up with the world powers. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that's a fairly interesting development right there, and we'll have to see largely how it goes. The best I can say. But with that, I hope that is addressed that well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Jose Aguera, as well as Nick Nelson and Silinx for each putting in a $2 donation and helping to keep us running. And we appreciate it very much from Jose and Silinx and Nick for that support. And thank you both three very much. And we also have a 2 from Severus Kloss, who says, love for the Netherlands.
Hey, and love to the Netherlands. Netherlands is a really interesting and neat country. Look at it. It's just neat. Like this town called Apeldoorn. I don't even know what's in it, but let's take a look. Man, I've seen this castle before. This is a Hell Let Loose map, or a Postscriptum map, isn't it? Like that specific castle, no joke, I think it is. But what a beautiful town. Oh, what in the world is this deer and that man doing? I don't know.
What the hell?
What the hell? My goodness. I don't know what's going on here in Apeldoorn. I think it's going a little wild over here. What other towns? Rotterdam, maybe, perhaps? No, look at that.
Also,
Oh.
by the way, I just want to say this as well. I don't mean to distract here from looking at the town, but Soliev is like losing his mind right now. Like, I know we watched that one footage of Soliev already. I just came across another one. I just came across another one of Soliev, and he's apparently weighing in on the threats being lobbed at Russia. And he's actively basically calling on the trumpets of war right now. Soliev, of course. He always kind of does that, but once again, he's just one of many voices in Russia right now that's absolutely going ham about the threat. And I have a feeling that Putin is going to be echoing those sentiments because he wants to maintain control over his people. And once again, the propagandists are controlled by Putin himself. So they're saying what Putin wants him to say, which indicates that it's not being received very well. So just kind of interesting. I reposted that, by the way. We'll probably have to watch that later because we're getting a little bit late in the stream, but he's getting wild.
A little long-winded around here. But nevertheless, I got to say, That is one hell of an interesting thing right there. And it sounds like the Russians are on meltdown mode. Wonder what's going to be happening in the future. Hopefully this doesn't turn into a full-blown conventional war, but it sounds like the Russians are pissed. But I still say that the U.S. stands its ground. That's what we always do, and that's what we'll do in this situation. And would you believe it, lo and behold, Dennis Davidov is here. What do we got,
Hey, Dennis
Matthew?
Davidov, what do you know?
It's Dennis Davidov. Dennis Davidov is in here. He just threw in a 100 Swiss franc super chat, and it says, "Stay awesome." Crazy. Dennis Davidov is in here at the latter end of the stream. It's like the last 5 minutes of the stream. But still, a massive thanks to you, Dennis, for the huge support and helping the channel to keep on running. And really neat to know that you're here right now. I don't know how long you've been here, if you've been here the whole show or not. But still, thank you once again for
crazy. I didn't know Dennis was watching the show that often. Like, Dennis, you've been here for like actually several nights now. And also, thank you very much for literally every time you show up, you're throwing in a super chat, by the way. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. But yeah, I didn't know you were an avid watcher of the channel like that. So it's good to have you.
Yeah, that's crazy. Dennis, I got to ask, hopefully you can type in the live chat. How often do you watch this show? Because I'm interested, because like I think this is the third super chat you've sent in I think a week and a half. So like how many days have you been here over the last week and a half? I'm interested because we never know who's watching unless they're in the live chat. So if you've been here every day, thank you for watching every day. Thank you for enjoying the stream. Because it's really crazy to think that you're here. Let's see. Just went in. Oh, so he just got here. But still, thank you so much for being here with us tonight again, Dennis Davidov, and thank you for enjoying the stream. Sadly, you're seeing the latter end of it because we're actually about to round this thing out in about 4 or 5 minutes or so. But still, a huge thanks for the support, and thank you so much for enjoying the channel and the news that we're putting out. Also, by the way, I know that you're probably going to be on, I think, your video making cycle here soon. Huge news. Rewatch our stream. The U.S. and Russia are going at it, so hopefully you'll have a pretty interesting video to make here in the near future because the news is going ham these days over the past, I'd say, 2 or 3 days. But anyways, with that, huge thank you once again, Dennis Davidov, for that massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Danny B once again, who puts in a 10. And huge shout to Danny once again for the, I believe, the third support of the night. And he says, again, Chef Danny here, and cheers to y'all. And y'all definitely put out the best new and most definitely, most definite news, and have the best followers of the LSA, and good night, enforcers, and the LSA, and thanks for the advice and supporting me.
Hey, no problem, Danny B. We're always happy to back up and support the folks of the LSA. And I got to thank you so much once again for the kind words and the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I wish you the best of luck, by the way, with that catering job coming up out in Aspen. That's got to be a big break. I know that you said in the chat that while the actual catering amount's like 13 grand, you'll only net 5.5. But that's crazy to think that it's 5.5 for one event. That's huge. Like, that's massive. And I wish you the best of luck with that. I hope it goes incredibly well. And of course, the Lee Spring Army is always here to back up and support every single one of our members, because we always know that everyone's out there just having a tough time of it, like everyone does every day. And we always love to know that we are just a little extra oomph, a little bit of extra support that the entirety of the community can support. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Big thanks to you once again, Danny B. And it actually looks like, crazily enough, we got another super chat from Dennis Davidov. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so Dennis very generously threw in a second super chat here. Another 100, I believe you said Swiss francs, right?
Swiss francs, yes.
Swiss francs. Thank you very much, Dennis, for that second support. Massive support, by the way. He said, I watch it like once in 3 to 4 days and don't have lots of time to watch, but I try. And thanks for your job, guys. And thank you very much, Dennis, once again, for the support yet again. Also, I do understand why you don't have a lot of time, because it takes a lot of time to make the videos. We know that. You know that as well. It's a very time-consuming job. I don't think many people actually know how much time goes into making videos. It's very time-consuming.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time, especially running live streams, videos, also us taking on separate video projects. That's another thing. And then just doing regular life stuff in between. So Dennis is very busy. We're very busy as well. And I understand his plight. But thank you very much, Dennis, once again for the kind words, and also showing up occasionally every 3 to 4 days. But Enforcer, what say you?
That's pretty cool to think that you're a regular viewer like that, though. We actually didn't know. And I got to thank you for the kind words and the support, Dennis. And also, I completely understand not having a lot of time. We rarely get to watch or really do much of anything outside of this because usually it takes up most of the day. I mean, after the show, here in the next 2 or 3 hours. I might be able to get around to reading a book or playing a game or something, but not really a lot of time because most of the day's taken up with making videos, checking things, getting this show ready. So I got to say, I appreciate you for spending the little free time you have, because we completely understand that position, watching the show. Because there's always folks that are asking us, hey, go watch this movie, check this out. And we just don't really have enough time to do any of that. And I always feel bad because I'm always like, dang it, I know they're going to ask me about it and I haven't had time to watch it. But still, thank you so much for appreciating our efforts and our work in being able to cover this news. Not just Ukraine war news these days, but news from around the world. It's really grown into a huge thing nowadays. But I got to thank you so much once again for the kind words. And Dennis Davidoff said, gaming helps to reset. I agree. I don't know what games you play personally, Dennis, but I always play War Thunder. That's apparently a favorite over in Ukraine, really. That's what I've heard, interestingly enough, is War Thunder or World of Tanks. And I think World of Tanks beats out War Thunder. But I always play a little bit of War Thunder and then just lots of train sims. Train Sim World 5 or something like that. They're fun. Or Railroad. Railroader's a pretty good one, but I haven't gotten around to that in a while. But yeah, I completely agree with that. Or reading a book. And I've been buying loads of books. Matthew can vouch for it. I got a stack of books next to my desk. And what's crazy is that sometimes I just get recently I was on a reading streak for a little bit. I was knocking out books every 2 days, but then I just got worn out, and now I'm just kind of sitting around playing games and not really reading much. Now I just got a stack of books that I'm kind of slowly grinding through at this point. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for the kind words and support. I hope that does address that well. And I hope that you have the best of luck with your channel over the next few days, because we actually do, much like yourself, you get to watch this channel every 3 to 4 days. Every once in a while, we watch some of your videos, and they are pretty good. And I got to thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next super chat here, this one is going to go to Mulder Channel, who puts in a $2 donation. And also, by the way, I'm going to be returning to John's super chat in just a moment. I almost missed it. But let's grab Mulder's real quick, who put in that too, and said, is there any extra info on the spy ship near the UK recently?
Yes, they actually did chase it off. It's currently in international water somewhere in the North Sea. And that's because they surfaced a Vanguard-class submarine, a nuclear-powered, nuclear-capable submarine, near the vessel, and that was enough to scare it off into international water. So that vessel is no longer bothering the United Kingdom at this point. I do not know its exact location, however. But with that, I hope that does address that question well. Thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also we have a $10 support, the first ever, from John A.L. Thunderchild BC.
Hey!
And thank you very much, John, for that first ever support and deciding to support the channel as well. And John said, morning from the UK, and I'm not normally here to see it live, and I have to watch the news from the start later on.
And I gotta say, thank you for the support. Thank you for your first super chat. And much quintessential British. It appears that you were a fan of the War of the Worlds, which is a British science fiction book or a science fiction novel, which is actually really cool that you actually have that in your name, the Thunderchild, because that is actually the ship that rammed a tripod in the original War of the Worlds book. So pretty cool that you have that in your name. When I heard that, I was like, oh, that's so cool. The original War of the Worlds reference. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. Because I know all of you folks over there in Europe have to get up at the crack of dawn. I don't even think the sun's risen yet for most of y'all when the stream goes live, and yet y'all are still here. And we got to thank y'all for y'all's dedication and commitment to being here and enjoying the stream and supporting it, because folks like y'all, much like the bulk of our American viewers, which make up most of this audience, make this thing possible. The Western world, along with the United States and all of our allies, is what makes the dream work every single day. And I got to thank you massively once again for the support, and I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Pete Watson, actually, once again, who puts in a 10 Australian, and thank you very much, Pete. I believe that might be Pete's third support of the night. He said, about to sign off, the term mash yellow is a joke, and Russian production and can't afford to make real sweet mushmallows. We all outside Russia can, and damn, another warm Russian oil fire to warm us up. Ukraine drones at work.
I gotta thank you so much for your support, Pete Watson. I thought you were originally talking about potato mash, which is kind of like the the gooey kind of like a organic gunk kind of that the vodka is made out of, kind of like a corn mash or something like that. But I still thank you so much for the support, and also a good try to joke. I thought I was generally getting it, I think, but still. Thank you once again, and it's nice to see another warm fire out there in Rsezow, keeping the folks warm this winter. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to, let's see here, Fumaz, who puts in a $2 donation, and thank you very much, Fumaz, for that support. And they said, what's y'all's opinion on prepping, and are you interested? Me personally, I'm not like an avid prepper. I do like have a stash of like survival and emergency supplies, and I do have some prepping supplies as well, but I'm not like one of these people that likes to like hoard beans and stuff like that in the basement. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not making fun of you if you do it. Like there's value to doing that, but in my opinion, me personally, I would still find a way to find food and goods in a normal way and simply just get it the way I need to get it. Not talking about go steal it. I'm just talking about go find it, where it usually is and try to, defend yourself and get it anyway. But generally speaking, I'm not an avid prepper, but I do have some prepping supplies just to sum that back up. But Enforcer, what say you?
Generally speaking, I'm not really a prepper. I really like, just being honest, like if you're a prepper, I get it and I understand the position y'all are coming from, but on a logistical and realistic perspective, I don't really understand prepping, because really the entirety of modern society lives detached from food production. Like, I'm sure none of y'all are out there with a plow or an oxen, tilling your fields and growing your crops. Most of modern industrialized society has moved well off of that. And that it would be a major part of being able to survive in that kind of a situation where you need something like that. Now, of course, if you're talking about prepping for short term, like a disaster, then I get it. But like for the folks who like prepare for like an apocalyptic like scenario where the supply chains completely fall apart, I don't really get that. Like, for example, surviving a nuclear apocalypse, because the chances are, you're just really betting against the odds if you survive through that. 70% of people will most likely end up dying, or at least 66%. And so I'm generally a person who goes with statistics, and I generally assume that I would be one of the standard statistics. I'm never one of those people who are like, oh, I'm built different, like I'll just survive the nuclear winter. No, I would generally be one of the people who believe I would generally die within the first year of nuclear bombs going off. Because statistically I would be. So I just don't really get like the whole prepping thing like for an apocalypse, but for like short-term disasters like hurricanes or power outages, I get it. But in the long term, I don't. So I don't really prep that much, to be entirely honest. And also on top of that, in the event of a disaster, there's loads of groups out there that help out: the Cajun Navy, FEMA, the dozens of them that will. And so, even then, you really don't need to prep too much, because they generally will arrive in the area at least a day or two after the disaster occurs, which is go ahead.
Honestly, if you want to be like prepared for like a bad event, mainly not Europeans, because I don't think many Europeans can actually own guns, or if they can, it's very limited. But if you're in the United States, it's wise just to have like one good rifle of some common caliber, and also probably a pistol as well of a common caliber, like 9mm or something like that. Maybe a rifle with 5.56, or if you're trying to like hunt small game, maybe 22 long rifle or something. And then also hoard up some good ammunition as well. That would be a good way to really prep. Because, of course, I think the main thing that would be a concern in a sort of like sketchy, chaotic scenario in the United States would be self-defense. That would be the main thing you need to worry about. Outside of that, it's mainly you're still going to get food from where you usually get food from, because you can't hoard enough food to survive for huge extended periods of time. You're still going to have to get out and go find food. So mainly just being armed and able to defend yourself is the only way to really like prep on a sort of like light scale, at least what I would say.
And another thing I also want to add, speaking about like an apocalyptic scenario, like a nuclear Armageddon, I'll be honest with y'all, I'm just going to be completely honest, I really don't want to live through that. Because nothing will ever be the same again, and you generally will be fighting to secure scraps for the remainder of your life, to not live, to survive. And my kind of a thing is, what would be the point of fighting through the rest of your life to just survive? You'll just like people will laugh at this, but truly do think about this. You will never be able to taste a burger again, like with spices inside of the patty, with some cheese on it, with the bun, with the ketchup and mustard, all that kind of stuff. Never again will that be a thing. That's gone. Once the bombs fall, and afterwards you're going to be eating beans, or you're going to be eating hardly anything. You're not going to be able to enjoy life. Your life is going to be a constant battle for survival, and even then you're not guaranteed success. You could just happen to catch a disease from bad water and end up dying of dysentery. It's like, though, that kind of a life isn't really living anymore. That's really just surviving. And it's like, would you really want to be the 1/3 of people that made it through a nuclear apocalypse to get to the other side and then really have no joy left in life anymore? And also the trauma of knowing that you're one of the few left alive and they're surrounded by dead, and just try and battle, survive as long as you can, but inevitably end up, dying and not even having a good life beyond that. So that's generally why, like, to be honest, I'm not really into prepping, because it's like, I wouldn't really want to live through something like that, to be entirely honest. Like, my will to live is strong, but it's not that strong. Like, I'll just be completely frank.
But at the same time, though, if you're still alive after something chaotic happens, your only option is going to be basically to starve to death. So, I mean, me personally, I'm going to have to like take my chances and like figure something out, because like I'm not starving to death.
Man, well, I hate to tell you, man, you're pretty, like, if the agricultural system that we have right now falls apart, you are guaranteed you're most likely going to starve, because if those
Walmart.
Well, dude, where in the world's Walmart going to get? Yeah, it's like, where in the world's Walmart going to get food? I mean, even if they were still open, like, eventually most people would just end up starving. Like, if you stock up food for a year, great, you will starve a year from now. If you don't have any food, you're starving now. Like, that's really what would happen at that point. And like, another thing, like, everyone's like, oh, I'll hunt. Yeah, the remaining 100 million people in the United States are also going to be hunting as well. So it's like, how many wild animals would be? I mean, quite literally, there's so many people still left alive a year after the bombs fall. If there is no form of crop-based agriculture and everyone's just hunting to get their food, the natural populations of animals that are edible are going to be depleted in less than a year's time after that. So you're still going to starve to death. It's truly a lose-lose scenario at that point. You just kind of have to hope that the bombs do not fall in an apocalyptic scenario, because if they do and you somehow survive and you're one of the lucky ones that survives beyond a year, there's just really no good outlook in life at that point. It's an incredibly bleak kind of an existence. But anyways, with that, also, commentator, you don't have to worry about irradiated crops and animals. The radioactive half-life of nuclear weaponry is only about 2 weeks, and so even if it gets into the soil and stuff, the radioactivity subsides after 2 weeks. So normal crop life would exist, but the ozone layer would be gone. Like, that's one thing we do know. The ozone layer, with that many nukes exploding at the same time, would completely disappear. So a pretty bad amount of UV radiation would be making it to the surface, so a lot of people would be dying a lot faster of cancer. There would be a lot more birth defects in pregnancies, if pregnancies were even happening at that point, among a whole other myriad of things, including people going blind because of the UV radiation in significant amounts, making it to your cornea, and then dealing significant damage in that form. Once again, life just wouldn't be good. Like, what's the point of living through that kind of a deal? I'd just hope that I'd be one of the people who got hit in the blast and it was quick. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, kind of in a morbid way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, our last super chat goes to Victor Navarowski, who puts in a $2 donation and says, thanks for awesome show, Denny's. And I would have to say, excuse me, thank you very much, Victor, for that support. And also, I say big shout out to Denny's as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd have to agree, Victor. Dennis runs a pretty good show. And I got to thank him so much for the massive support tonight. And I got to thank you, Victor, for the support tonight and helping this channel to keep on running. And giving a big shout out to Dennis Davidoff. And so with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving into our live chat questions here, we're going to get our Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, or Royal Fluffiness, Arabelle Garbo, and Joni Dog. They said the LSA Morse code decipher says it appears that the demand to ramp up spending can only relate to one thing, an LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I can congratulate y'all on getting that correct for the 1,065th day in a row. Really impressive to know that y'all have continued to get that right time and time again, and hopefully will continue to in the future. And, of course, sadly, this wasn't the intent. We were actually hoping to get more than 3 live chat questions tonight, but we are running over time now. And so we'll be gathering 3 live chat questions and then rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to Dustin Mayo, who says, should Alaska be prepared for a possible Russian invasion at some point?
I would say no. The Russian military does not have the logistical ability to conduct a naval invasion of Alaska, and not only that, Alaska would not be able to support the infrastructure needed to maintain a large occupation force of any significant note outside of Anchorage. So for that reason, I would say largely not the case, and also the U.S. Navy would be able to protect Alaska from a possible Russian invasion because they would have to travel from Vladivostok all the way to Anchorage, which would be a significant voyage that the United States would be able to track and intercept before they even made it there. So I would say generally no. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to, let's see here. I'm going through them all to see which one is the most pressing question of them all. Let's see here. Looking. Let's see, looking. Let's see here. This one goes to Chris Harden, who says, what weapons does Russia seriously have in its arsenal that could be formidable to NATO weapons?
Not really any in the conventional sense. Sorry for the voice crack there, but not really any in the conventional sense. Most of their military weaponry is fairly dated compared to Western technology. We're speaking about 30 to 20 years as an average. Some of their technology is getting a little bit on up there. The S-500 is believed to be somewhat comparable to the THAAD, but that's only off of belief. That's not off of actual fact and statistics, so we wouldn't know that for certain. But still, it generally seems, from what we know, there really isn't a lot conventionally that the Russians have that could be concerning. ICBMs are always concerning, especially when nuclear armed, because there really is no effective defense against a Russian ICBM, especially if they were launched from east of the Ural mountain range and flew directly over the North Pole to the United States. None of the Aegis Ashore systems would be in range at that point to intercept those missiles, and so they largely would have a 100% chance of making it to the United States and hitting their targets. So really the nuclear weaponry is the only thing that's incredibly concerning about the Russian Federation, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Activista, who says, when you take on the big Panama Canal story, could you please include China's big presence there, building and funding literal bridges? And can you do that? What are your thoughts?
Actually, that is the plan. That's generally what we're going to be covering, because that's a part of the U.S. reason or the U.S. explanation by the President of the United States to reclaim the Panama Canal, either through diplomatic or martial means, is that they're claiming that the Chinese are beginning to build up heavy investments inside of Panama, and this is shifting the Panamanian government to be more aligned to the Communist Chinese than to the United States. And considering the strategic significance of such a canal in the Americas, the general idea is that this should not be allowed. The country of Panama should not be compromised by the Communist Chinese, and instead the U.S. Panama Canal Authority should be reestablished with the same parameters that existed under the 1903 treaty that gave the land to the United States when Panama declared independence from Colombia. And that's kind of the general premise. There's another side to that. There's the pool that the Panamanians are putting forward as to why they are not going to give up the canal. But that generally is a major part of the U.S. explanation as to why they want to retake the canal and bring it back under U.S. control as a U.S. territory. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. I'm way ahead of you there. I actually had that in as the plan. But a big thanks to everyone once again for watching tonight. Absolutely crazy viewership. We've actually had nearly 100,000 people watch the stream before it ended. Absolutely impressive right there. And I got to thank everyone who was here watching tonight. We had nearly 14,000 people here at the peak. It was technically 13.9 thousand live viewers, and about 95,000 people have watched the stream up to this point. We are entirely honored and appreciative of each and every one of y'all giving us about 3 hours and 50 minutes of y'all's time watching the stream. We thank every single person who was here tonight, both the folks who supported the channel and Super Chat and the folks who didn't. We're entirely honored and appreciative of knowing that we get to cover the news to thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people every single day on this channel. It's a position that we take with high honor and regard, and of course I got to thank you all once again for joining us tonight and hearing a little bit of the story of y'all's lives as it's unfolding out there in the world at large every single day. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and if there's any major news happening in the middle of the day, I will be the one giving y'all the scoop on that news. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, good night, folks, and thank you all for another great stream once again tonight. And a huge shout out to the almost 100,000 people that joined us on this very, very large stream tonight. And once again, I'm sure there will be massive news to cover tomorrow. It sounds like something is brewing in the background that we're really not fully aware of right now. So I imagine we probably will have a short war video out tomorrow for you all to listen to keep you up to date with the news. But with that, be sure to go check out my video if you haven't already that I published today. The Enforcer Explained series will be continuing on. The next one will likely be the Panama Canal video, and the next one after that is to be announced. But with that, folks, thank you all once again for watching, and Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, give some rest, and good night.